Good morning. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all today. Today marks the start of what is an exciting and ambitious journey. We all know that innovation is risky. At Innovate UK KTN, we see thousands of projects a year across sectors and technology areas. So many projects fall short of the impact they could have. They fail to scale, manufacture, to raise investment, or sometimes even worse, they succeed and then have unintended consequences, creating systemic issues, or they miss market opportunities, or the chance to delight their customers, all because they've overlooked some important insights early on in the development process. But we're here to bring you some good news. It does not have to be this way. Good design offers an alternative. It asks challenging questions up front and tests, are we doing the right thing? Rather than just asking, are we doing the thing right? So my name's Abby Hurd. I head up the Innovate UK KTN Design Innovation Network. And this network brings together some of the best minds and greatest thinkers from the UK and around the world in areas of innovation, development, new technologies and design. Our point of difference and our leverage for powerful positive change is that we're rooted in the KTN community of 200,000 plus innovators. We're not a design talking shop, we are for innovators, and it is our purpose to help people think about the innovation process differently. We're doing this using a set of tools and approaches that are broadly called design. Importantly, we see design as more than just the visual and the aesthetic. We see design as more than just user-centered, more than design thinking. So much of that stuff is good, but it's not good enough on its own. It tends to be focused on the individual, and this can often be at the detriment of wider society or the planet. Good design and great innovation is more than that. So as designers and innovators, we need to up our game. Good design is systems aware and cognizant of entanglements. It is responsible, and it leads to innovations that make powerful positive change to the economy, society, and the wider world. Our Design Innovation Network is charged with finding answers to the challenge of systems-aware innovation and tasked with facilitating the use of design to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges, to help introduce positive change and shape our collective future. So this Design Innovation Network, who's it for? Who's signed up so far? So the detail on this slide is pretty small, but hopefully what's clear is the spread across sectors and technology areas and the different types of organisations involved. Sometime in the next few months, we'll publish the data, so those of you who are interested can have a closer look at who's in our network. There'll be more visibility. Although we've just launched, we've got this reasonable spread. Ultimately, what we're looking for is a change in this profile. We're looking for a 75-25 innovator to designer ratio of active community members. In the next few months, we'll launch a collaborative platform to create visibility and enable connection across the community. We'll also be reviewing the role of design and the challenges we run and facilitating connections between design and technology developers through events. We're looking forward to revealing more in due course and welcome you to come with us on this journey. Over the past few months, we've been speaking to people who've joined our network, and out of the 550 sign-ups so far, we've spoken to about 150 of you one-to-one. So those conversations have played a part in shaping our agenda today. Today, we've got an amazing panel to share thoughts and insights into some expansive ways of doing design and innovation, speaking from experience with battle scars and adventure stories. They're guaranteed to stimulate new thinking and inspire you to rethink design and innovation. But before we dive into the panel introductions, I'd love to get a sense of what your hopes are for the Design Innovation Network. So can we have a virtual show of hands, using Menti? And what we're going to look at is what's the main thing you folks are hoping to get from the Design Innovation Network. These thoughts and insights are going to be really useful for us as we start to shape the network and prioritise different activities. So yeah, thank you for your contribution to that, Menti. We're going to cover a whole range of possible things that you could want from the network. through our activities, from collaboration, forming links to helping you find funding for design, some guidance on how to use design. All of this will be part of our network activity. Yeah, so thank you for those contributions.
Abby, I can see the Menti responses.
Or do you want to chat it through, Chris?
Yeah, very quickly. So top of the list is to learn more about the program, which is kind of what we're doing today. And then there are 3 that are around, so to gain new insights into design and innovation effectiveness, to learn about potential solutions to the challenges I face. So I would be interested to find out more about the specifics of your challenges, to connect with potential customers. And then the last one I'll call out is to connect with businesses and people who think about things differently and provide new perspectives, which is certainly one of the core attributes we're trying to build into the network.
Thanks, Chris. You definitely rescued me there. Yeah. Yeah, so the welcome part of today, that's what we're covering now. But in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Chris, who you've met just now. And Chris is chair of our advisory board. And then we'll come to Ben Griffin. So both Chris and Ben have been key figures in shaping the scope and delivery of the Design Innovation Network. We'll then move on to the main event, which are 6 inspiring short talks on design and innovation before opening up for Q&A. So get your questions ready, stick them in the chat as we go, and we can put these to our panel. And then we'll wind down for lunch with a discussion on next steps. After lunch, following this morning session, which is really about inspiring you, we'll have a panel session on the practicalities of making this all happen, again with some great panelists who have a wealth of experience. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chris Thompson, who's chair of our advisory board. And with an abundance of experience in really progressive design and innovation thinking, I'm going to hand over to Chris as our advisory board chair and also as my co-chair for today's session. Chris, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. Yeah, so I'm Chris Thompson. I'm the founder of innovation consultancy Dynamics. Dynamics has been doing innovation consulting for over 20 years. Before that, I spent 13 years working in design consulting at Fitch and then at a firm called PSD. My background before that was in physics, engineering and accountancy. So I'm really pleased to have been invited to chair this board and this panel. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. And you know, the journey that we're on collectively is a journey that I personally feel I've been on for the bulk of my career, trying to help make innovation happen, building the capability and the tools and the methods to do that. But Abby and Ben have pulled together a diverse group of volunteers. So these board members are all volunteers. We're not being paid. What brings us together is we share a passion for addressing the challenges and the opportunities of leveraging design thinking, system thinking, and so combining that with any other kind of thinking that we need in order to address the challenges and the opportunities of making innovation happen. I think you know, there's some grey hairs in this group, including me, and we've seen a lot of successes, and we've been involved in quite a number of other initiatives that have also been tilting at this windmill. So we've seen success, but we're also pretty sanguine about the challenges and the barriers that need to be addressed, and that's one of the things that we're going to be particularly focused on. So I'm not going to go through all of the people on this list. You can see them, and you can look us up on LinkedIn as well. But we have a mix of backgrounds. We come from the worlds of architecture, from design, from engineering, science, academia, consulting, and we've also worked in businesses. And what's not listed here in terms of the organizations that we represent, but the history of some of our members. 2 of us were ex-directors or have been directors of the Design Business Association. So, you know, we have personally invested our time in the promotion of the design consulting industry. And 2 of us were senior leaders of the Design Council. So we've been involved in helping shape and form where the Design Council has got to today and all of the great things that they've done, including what Kat is going to be telling us about later this morning. And one of us is still, actively engaged in the leadership of the Institute of Engineering Designers. I think we might hear more about that, and has also advised on the sort of the development of British standards, the British Standards Institute. So we're a diverse group, but what have we signed up for? In terms of reference, I'm going to paraphrase this. There are really 4 points. We recognize that there is so much more to be achieved. So we're being asked to think about how to determine the impact of design on innovation performance. So let's get a bit serious about the metrics behind the belief that we probably all have that there is more to be done. We need to know what's getting in the way. So if this is a lot of what we're going to be talking about will seem like blinding common sense. So we need to understand what the barriers are. Why have we been working on all of these initiatives over these years? We've had great examples of success, but it just hasn't scaled and it hasn't stuck. And then having identified those barriers, how are we going to overcome them? What are the methods, the tools, the techniques that we can develop and deploy that will maximize the impact? And then finally, it's kind of our role to be a bit of a grit in the oyster in terms of helping Innovate UK, KTN, define the role of design in their innovation strategy. So that all sounds very simple. It isn't. We've just started the journey. So we've had one meeting of the board. Abby and I have interviewed each of the members separately, and we're sort of pulling together what we think are the key, the shared kind of common themes. We're going to work those up together. We're going to refine them with the board, and then I think over time, I hope that you will see us reaching out to you to have you help participate in the shaping of the responses to the key challenges that we think need to be addressed. Over to you, Abby.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, really excited about working with you and the board. What a group of people. Ben, over to you. Ben Griffin from Innovate UK.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the launch of Innovate UK KTN's Design Innovation Network. My name's Ben Griffin. My background is in industrial design consultancy, but since 2015, I've led the design programme at Innovate UK. I want to use these 5 minutes to talk about our mission and the important role of the Design Innovation Network in that context. In November last year, we published our Plan for Action, which articulates the part Innovate UK will play in helping realise the government's vision for the UK to be a global innovation hub by 2035. That plan is built around 5 strategic themes. Firstly, the transition to a future economy that offers quality of life for all, whilst protecting our environment and conserving the Earth's resources. Secondly, support for innovating businesses to grow and scale. That means thinking beyond individual projects to increase our focus on companies and their growth journey. Thirdly, helping businesses respond to global opportunities and to succeed on the international stage. Theme 4 is about improving the UK's innovation ecosystem so that it's easier for businesses to access the knowledge, facilities and equipment they need to succeed. And lastly, we'll help government to support innovation through the levers available to it, including procurement, standards, intellectual property regimes, legislation and regulation. A new aspect of this plan is the inclusion of 6 strong foundations. These underpin the strategic themes, supporting better innovation outcomes and greater impact across the board. Leveraging the UK's science and research capabilities, for example, as well as promoting equality, diversity and inclusion. I'm proud to say that another of those 6 foundations is design, and its inclusion here is significant. It's a recognition of design's role in innovation. to help us understand problems from different perspectives, to manage complexity and uncertainty, to show us visions of a better future and how we might get there, and to translate intangible insight into tangible solutions that offer real benefits for people and the planet, and that are more likely to be adopted. Today, we face challenges of daunting magnitude and complexity: climate change, disease, inequality. We need to change the way we live, work, and travel. We need to change our built environment and the products and services we use. We need to redesign our future. It would be foolish to do that without making use of the very best design expertise and methodologies available to us. In the face of these challenges, design itself is evolving. Businesses can and have profited by using design to create more desirable, convenient products and services that attract more customers and command a premium. But if we're to dramatically reduce our carbon emissions, for example, it's likely we'll have to make choices that are perhaps less convenient and require more effort. So we must now harness the power of design to make those choices acceptable and even desirable. We need a holistic design approach that fuses planet-centered and people-centered thinking, and that employs new skill sets and methods to tackle the increasingly complex system-level problems. But what do you think? What does the future of design in innovation look like to you? What challenges do you face as a business, and how could design help? More practically, where do you find the best design talent? How do you plan, procure, and manage design interventions for maximum impact? Or build an effective design function within your growing organization? The Design Innovation Network will provide a forum to connect and explore these issues together, to share ideas, ask questions, and to find the answers, support, and resources you need to unlock the benefits of great design. As the conversation develops, it will help Innovate UK understand what it is about design that matters most to you, our business customers, so that we can shape our approach and support interventions to support you better. Thanks again for joining us today. I hope you're as excited as I am to be part of this network, and that you'll find it an inspiring and valuable community.
Thank you, Ben. What a time for thinking about innovation differently and striving for positive change. The synergy between this community and recognition of design as a strong foundation for innovation presents exciting opportunities for all of us to think and work differently. Okay, so the part I'm most excited about hearing from our speakers, each carefully selected to unveil an expansive view of design. Things that in the conversations across the community we realised were important to shed light on, things that will figure highly in how we shape and deliver the network. So these sessions are intended to inspire you to think differently about design and innovation, where and how it can be used and to what effect. First of our three speakers, Alison, Tim and Matt will speak about how we can think about design and innovation differently, whilst the last three speakers, Kat, Adrian and Alison, Meryl, will focus specifically on deeply important aspects of design and innovation.
And a quick reminder before we dive in, as we go, please could you put your questions for the speakers into the chat, and we'll have time then for the Q&A at the end of the session.
Yeah, thanks Chris, good shout. So first up, we've got Alison Trenderville, Professor of Service Design at University of the Arts London. We invited Alison to share her insights today as she's an advocate, a living, breathing example of how design can be used at the earliest stages, the lowest technology readiness levels. Although an academic, design is really embodied in all of Alison's work. Design is not an add-on, it shouldn't be an afterthought, and Alison is really testament to that. So over to you, please, Alison.
So thank you very much, Abby. So I'd like to just share my thoughts on some research projects that I'm working on. So I'd like to really communicate how different ways design is involved in positive change through its role in the development of diagnostic interventions in the Global South. So before I start, I should just say that design's role in academic research has many parallels to its contribution to business. And increasingly so. And to illustrate this, I have included the Danish design ladder diagram, admittedly from 2002, but adapted by two fellow academic researchers, Professor Tom Innes and Paul Rogers, that shows the similarities between design research and design in business. And effectively what we're promoting now is the strategic use of design in academic research. And this is an emerging area. And basically, I use design within my own research at levels 3 and 4, which is really design as a process within research projects. For example, the use of design methods and co-design. I also use it within level 4, which is designed to facilitate research strategy. It's very difficult to find evidence of design research and academic research at level 5 and 6. However, I do believe this will change over time. And design research is increasingly expected to tackle wicked problems. And for this reason, we do need to have it in these complex design research areas. So climate change, food security, and my own work in antimicrobial resistance is interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. As researchers, we need to think about the strategic use of design and its use of methods and tools in the team to co-create knowledge and with the communities that we are working with. So just to give a bit of background, so I'm working in the area of One Health, user-driven solutions to AMR. And I guess the One Health approach is particularly helpful when dealing with zoonotic diseases or with challenges like antimicrobial resistance. A One Health approach draws on multi-sectorial expertise, working within the areas of policy, legislation, and also action research. And effectively, it's really where we have transmission of disease through the entanglement of humans, animals, and the environment. And of course, we've all had very close experience of this recently in the last 2 years with COVID-19. So this is a multi-sectorial approach, and it really does come together and really to integrate and try and tackle the problem at hand. So the project that I'm actually working on is called Dosa, which is Diagnostics for a One Health user-driven solution to antimicrobial resistance. It's a highly collaborative project. It's 3 years research funded by UKRI, ESRC, and also the Department of Biotechnology in India. The project is led by Professor Till Bachman, who is Deputy Head of Infection Medicine at Edinburgh Medical School, but also a Professor of Molecular Diagnostics and Infection. And our partners are at Bradford, Southampton University, and of course myself at UAL, but we have amazing Indian partners at IIT Delhi, Centre for Indian Fisheries Technology, Assam University, Silchar Medical School, ICAR, Indian Centre for Agricultural Research, and CCAMP, the Centre for Cellular and Molecular Platforms. So when we think about antimicrobial resistance, what am I actually referring to? And in this case, I'm talking about pathogens, in this case, bacteria, where antibiotics are increasingly becoming ineffective against a range of infections. And this is really known and has been referred to as the slow pandemic. So Dosa, what's unusual about the project? Well, it's transdisciplinary. And what does this mean? It means that actually we are dealing with a complex social and ecological systems that are really not set within disciplinary boundaries. And this involves both inner scientific cooperation between various disciplines and fields, as well as cooperation between science and society. Ideally, it should be a process of mutual learning between science and society. And here lies the challenge, and also offers the opportunity for design. When design is involved as a set of practices and processes, actually it can facilitate the co-creation of knowledge, both within the team and with external stakeholders. And the Dosa team has really, really maximized this. And I would say we probably are, after 3 years, we've become very effective in terms of knowing how to integrate the knowledge across the different chemistry, diagnostics, microbiology, team members, and also with the community members that we're working with. And just to really think about actually how do we even conceptualize diagnostics? Well, I think, again, if I asked this question 2 years ago, we would have had a very, very different response. Whereas now I think the public is very familiar with things like PCR, polymerase chain reactions, and lateral flows. In this last 2 years, we've all become very close to the idea of diagnostics, firstly being presented as being used by specialists, which you had to post off to get your results and wait 48 hours, to something that actually is used in the home, very universally accepted, taking 15 minutes. So our experience of familiarity of them has changed, again, rapidly over the last 2 years. But what does this mean actually when you're working in a country like India, especially actually taking a One Health approach? So we're looking really at diagnostics within 3 areas. We're looking at diagnostics for antibiotic residues in the shrimp production process. This is a highly complex supply chain, which is temporal, spatial, and also has very focused and situated practices on the ground. So again, where does diagnostics fit within this highly complex system of regulation, certification, everyday challenges, climate change? We're also looking at dairy setting, and we're looking at the diagnosis of mastitis in cows and also the detection of antibiotic residues in milk. In the dairy setting, we are looking at 2 diagnostic opportunities, and which really both pose a huge problem for Indian farmers, often leading to the overuse of last resort antibiotics such as colistin. And also we are looking at detecting residues that when the cow is taken out of production and for withdrawal periods when they've received antibiotics, that they have better indicators knowing when that cow can be returned to the production system. But the focus of today's talk really is on the human setting. And to complete the One Health approach, we are focusing on urinary tract infections in human health. And this is a very common infection, particularly for women. And it's also basically going to be the focus of the remainder of this talk. So when we started off thinking about urinary tract infections and what a diagnostic would look like, there was a general assumption that this would be in a primary healthcare centre. This is where it needed to be based. We used extensive design ethnographic work, again, mapping, focus groups, co-design. And in fact, what we identified was that there was limited awareness of antimicrobial resistance. Purchase over-the-counter medicines was very common. Knowledge of antibiotics is extremely limited, often just referred to as medicines. There is really no driver to seek medical care until it's a must because of travel times, because of stigma, also because there are cultural issues over of being a woman. PHCs are also burdened with large numbers of patients, with an average number of patients per day being over 150. So you go to the PHC and then you have to wait hours, having traveled also for a long period of time. There is also, if we take the photograph on the left-hand side, the lab facilities are extremely basic. Just to say thank you, my slide had disappeared. So again, what we're looking at is very, very simple infrastructure in terms of access to water and also electricity. The other thing we discovered was that actually urinary tract infections was not known. So again, you actually ask yourself, well, are we looking at the wrong problem space here as designers? But the first thing then we said is, if UTI, this is a global north, it's a medical term. Actually, what would happen if we were to visualize the symptoms as a card? And I have the English version here, but this was all translated into Bengali. And we went into the community and working with ASHES, accredited social health activists, and we spoke in small groups around symptoms. And suddenly in this community, we were opened up to very personal and extremely troubling stories about the recurring issue of UTI. This is something that has a local word, which is called tetrangi. It recurs often, particularly in women, every 6 to 8 weeks. And actually, in most cases, they suffer silently for this. There's also increasing evidence from our baseline microbiology data that, for example, there are resistant genes in the urine samples, and also that there's anecdotally increasing evidence of kidney injury. However, the positive of the side of this is there's also a lot of local implicit knowledge around natural remedies. And these natural remedies are shared by the ASHAs in terms of alleviating symptoms and also actually getting rid of what is thought to be UTI. One of the other problems is that these symptoms appear during the hot season, also during fasting periods. So is it UTI or is it actually dehydration? So visualizing this problem space was one of the early breakthroughs we had. So instead of seeing this all about antibiotic use, we actually took the view as designers to say, well, what are the sort of systems of knowledge that we need to build in this community, which will actually give the community members knowledge about themselves in terms of the symptoms, give the ASHAs the ability to recognize and to identify what the symptoms are, and also for the PHC to be able to have a short and effective conversation over actually what these symptoms are as well when people travel for a long time and then wait for their appointments. So really this was less about should people be using antibiotics or not, but much more about how can people understand themselves in order to make better decisions. And one of the things that we have been working on is really closely co-designing with the community. And this is one of many trips that we've made to Assam. And we've been working with the ASHAs, who, as I've mentioned, are these accredited social health activists who really are the trusted members within the community. And we've been developing, taking our prototypes and the ideas to them, and they have been interacting with us and giving feedback and incredibly useful information about the community's problems. So one of the things we've actually developed from this is that this diagnostic test could not be in the primary healthcare centre. What we needed to do was actually even forget the word diagnostic and just think about what would a community test look like. One of the things from this we've developed is a prototype, which is actually a pack of information, and Edinburgh are developing a very simple paper test. Now, in this prototype pack, what you will get is a visual story, which tells you about how to use the test. You will get a card on the symptoms that you can mark. And also you will get a natural remedy card, so you can record your natural remedies, and also a recording strip where you record your test results. You're given 4 days of test. And in this 4 days, we know that actually if you take a test and you follow the instructions of the ASHAs, which is about increasing your water intake, taking natural remedies, after 4 days, especially if most cases it could be just a case of dehydration, the symptoms will go. And the test, after maybe 1 or 2 days of testing positive, will return to a neutral negative test. The tests will tell you whether you have a UTI, and the test will also tell you if actually it's not a UTI, but you have a bacterial infection. So this is a very simple, easy to understand test. One of the things we've done is create the service scenario through our interactions with the ASHAs, and this is basically a little storyboard here. So we've also linked in with the health and sanitation days, and the idea is that the ASHAs would have this pack at the health and sanitation days. This would be introduced to the community. Then when community members have the symptoms, they would contact the ASHA. The ASHA would give them the pack and the 4 days of testing. There is also one strip as a spare test. After 4 days of testing, taking the natural remedies and recording the test results, hopefully all the symptoms would have cleared up. And also there is advice in this pack about not buying antibiotics from over the counter, personal hygiene, and other recommendations that will actually, again, prevent these symptoms reoccurring. However, if it's in the case that the symptoms are still there, persist, and also the test is positive after the 4 days, this person is fast tracked to the primary healthcare centre. They do not have to wait for an appointment. They can just turn up. And there the doctor will be able to see the symptoms card, the recording, and the test results. They will know that they are having a conversation around UTI, and the doctors will be able to then prescribe the correct and accurate prescription for the use of antibiotics. And the next thing that we did was to actually question, well, how do we actually, during COVID, when we had limited field work, we want to really, again, take the community on a journey of actually what this test is about, what this knowledge is actually offering. So we had 18 ashers who were willing to work with us, and we purchased mobile phones for them. And we gave them the prototypes, and they have been going to the community and having the conversations around tetrangi, around the symptoms, about the use of the appropriate use of antibiotics. And they've been WhatsApping this information back to us. So just to give an example here, this is one of the data sheets. I have a WhatsApp group with 18 ashers and supervisors, and over the second real life walkthrough, we have been receiving information on how the visualization cards helps them to have conversations with the community, how the natural remedies that is actually being systematically recording and also building knowledge with the ashers over what's appropriate. And then also, again, what would be with the test, although they're not using the test, getting feedback about what does it feel like, would they be happy using it, is it the right length, is it something that they feel comfortable around using. So all this data from really the field on where the actual test will be used is coming back to us as almost like a rehearsal on how the future may be. And I guess one of the things now that we'd say, well, how is this changing the system? Well, on this diagram, what I think I'm trying to show here is that we're trying to strengthen, as I said, the knowledge system to manage AMR. We know from social science research, but also from the failure of other products and projects, you just can't tell people to stop using antibiotics. You actually have to co-create value for them. And this is how our thinking that has also applied with aquaculture and the dairy. People are very suspicious about outsiders, but also whether they're officials, but people coming into communities and basically telling them what is wrong when they're faced with all sorts of challenges each day. However, having the visualization cards just as a first step to recognize the symptoms has been greatly appreciated. It's really opened up people's idea about their own health. The ashers feel more confident about giving advice because they know that they're dealing with something tangible here. The natural remedies, we're consolidating the knowledge within the area. The PHC, when they go and they get the correct advice and the correct prescription, we have a data management flow supporting this very simple test. So when we look at what the innovation is here, we're actually looking at, on one level, the dry chemistry of the test, but we're also looking at the innovation around the service scenario. We are frequently asked with this project, what will be the benefit of our test compared to the current urine dip tests that are available in the global north? Well, ours is very context specific. It has a number of advantages. It's extremely easy to use. Again, the feedback we're getting from the community at this moment is that they absolutely understand it. It's very simple. They like it in terms of saying in terms of the readings and understanding what's going on. It's going to be disposable and biodegradable, and its performance in high heat and humidity will work within Assam, and it will be extremely low cost to produce and produced locally. So when we talk about how do we tackle things like antimicrobial resistance, we also have to look at actually, well, where are the gaps in the knowledge in the community in order to feel that they can actively engage in a meaningful way, which isn't really going to stigmatize them, isn't going to actually exclude them from perhaps their only source of healthcare. And so with the service scenario to support the test, we have identified these gaps in the system where actually we can build knowledge in a very gentle way around actually maintaining your own health and also the best action to take when you have these symptoms. So I hope that was a bit of a race and I hope it was clear. And we have two other sites that we're working with, as I said, on the dairy and the aquaculture. And I have to say, I am working with an amazing team of people. And when I think of actually what design's contribution is this space, it's very much about building trust with the community through the ashes around the symptoms of UTI, being able to visualize that and co-design with them. It is about adopting a systemic approach to make tangible the interconnectedness, the relationships and the interlinkages for diagnostic interventions. And really this co-creating knowledge within the teams across the settings, and to co-create value with the communities to develop the diagnostic solutions to manage AMR really is where design has probably made its greatest contribution.
Thank you, Alison. That was brilliant, very inspiring, and yeah, beautiful piece of work that's definitely up there on the design ladder. I don't know why you're so modest about 4 and 5. You're kind of turning the AMR question on its head, and going back to really unpicking it. What does it mean for people?
Yeah.
And clearly there's massive impact coming out from this, helping us to learn to live more effectively with bacteria and manage human and animal conditions. Brilliant work. The next speaker is going to take a look at sort of developing a systems engineering approach to addressing complex systems with long development times. So Tim's going to drill down into how can a systems aware design approach using systems thinking in pragmatic ways in projects and programs that have to be agile and fast paced. Tim, over to you.
So thank you, Chris, and thanks for the invite to talk here. So within my consultancy, Edinburgh Systems, I spend about half my time solving large engineering challenges, working on things like how we can get to net zero for aviation by building the infrastructure in airports, and also helping companies be more innovate, helping them build their capability to solve problems using systems approaches. I'm also a Royal Academy of Engineering sponsored visiting professor in systems engineering at Heriot-Watt University. So we're trying to build these skills into the students so that when they go into industry, they have the right abilities to help solve these challenges in the future. So we're going to talk about some systems approaches for innovative design and hopefully give you some ideas of what you might be able to put into practice. So one thing I think I'd like to start on is what is innovation, because there's often a lack of understanding in companies as to what it means to be innovative. And when we create technology, there's really 3 core processes that take place. The first is scientific discovery, what our universities are fantastic at doing. And that's improving our understanding of the world. And it's really turning money into knowledge, where we're trying to learn about the world and spend money on research funding. And that's vital to build that understanding, because that lets us be inventive. That's where we create these new concepts and we turn knowledge into novel ideas. There's a big difference between invention and innovation, because invention doesn't need to solve valuable, pervasive, and urgent problems for the market, whereas innovation does. And innovation is all about solving those real-world problems for people with the products and services that we develop. So that's taking those ideas and turning them into money. And we have in companies, we have this technology push, and a lot of organizations have traditionally been focused around building incremental product updates or trying to be inventive, creating intellectual property and then looking for markets for that. But in fact, what they need to be is innovative. And that's getting that pull from the market and bringing those ideas in to try and guide their innovation processes so that they're actually solving the right problems. And that's where some of the systems thinking and system engineering helps. So we've got 2 big challenges, and we're going to look at design thinking versus systems thinking. First thing is we need to build the right product for the market. We need to select something that customers want, that stakeholders want, and that's valuable, pervasive, and urgent. The key factors that you see in product management. Secondly, we need to build that product right. That's about having the right engineering processes in place so that you're not getting lots of rework. It's making sure that you're considering other factors like safety, like manufacturability. So looking at the difference in approach between design thinking and systems thinking, because they both complement each other. In design thinking, we tend to have well-bounded problems. We're often learning early from mock-ups and prototypes. And it's very user-focused. We're looking at empathizing with our stakeholders, doing interviews, shadowing, looking at their personas, pain points. And this builds some great relationships. It's near-field user-focused design. In systems thinking, on the other hand, we're looking at some of the bigger open problems and challenges. It's taking a holistic approach and looking outside that system as well as inside, looking at the relationships and interactions between parts, looking at different viewpoints of how different people see the system, and considering the boundaries of that system. What's the boundary of the problem you're solving? How does your system interface with others or interface internally? And looking at the dynamics and the emergent behaviors. So cause and effect, and what happens when you put those building blocks together. Do they produce positive emergence and do the good things that you want, or the negative consequences when you actually create that product? So that's building the right product. In terms of building the product right, design thinking approaches are usually build early and fail fast, so iterative design, and it's bottom up. It's taking building blocks, putting them together, trying them. And this is really valuable. And if we can do this more in low-cost ways, we see in industry the bigger projects are actually not doing enough of this to try and learn early in the design process. On a systems approach, systems thinking also incorporates the systems engineering approaches here. It's front-loaded, so we're trying to build as much knowledge as we can before we go into the design process, because we commit most of the costs in our product development fairly early on when we decide which product we're building to solve those problems. So we take this top-down approach, decomposing the problems, looking to manage the complexity. And with some now, we're seeing more and more companies introduce techniques like requirements management and things from a systems engineering approach. So design thinking pays off to do that learning very early, and things like design sprints I see introduced into companies who've never brought in design techniques, but we're also bringing those systems approaches so they can do things in a slightly more rigorous manner. So the key factors here that we need to think about, first of all, everything is a system. So this is core to what we're looking at, so that even the smallest components of that system are systems in themselves, right up to the biggest grand challenges of solving things like net zero, improving healthcare around the world. All of these are systems. And when we create systems, so when we build systems, we need to remember that system exists to solve problems which are external to the system. So that means we're actually trying to build a system that solves problems outside that box. And rather than spending all our time focusing on the technology inside the box, which I think a lot of engineers are predisposed to solving interesting challenges because they like the technical challenge, we want to actually look at those problems outside, because the purpose of that system is really to do something for stakeholders and do something for users. So we're going to look at two examples here. One, a very simple product, and one's a much bigger challenge for the world. So the first, as a simple product, looking outside the boundary, we're going to look at the humble battery here, which there's not been much in the way of innovation in terms of a design-focused side of things recently. We see increased capacity, we see reduced cost, and perhaps the only user-focused feature on what we put into our products is a little meter that shows you how much charge the battery still has on the side of some of them. But that battery could be part of a bigger system, could be a battery pack to go into another application. One big area that I've been working on is electric vehicles recently, and of course there's all the concern around the range of those vehicles and the usability, the life of the battery. There's the environmental factors that all need to be considered. So if we think about one of the things we could do is, as designers in this battery company, we could look at increasing the capacity. And that has an impact on the battery pack, that increases the overall capacity of the pack. It might let us put less batteries in, so decrease the weight, decrease the size. So there's problems that we solve at that level in the system. As we go up, increased capacity means increased range, as does a decreased weight. We might have increased acceleration, we might have more space in the vehicle. So what we can do at a low level of that system is solve problems much further up in the systems of systems that we're looking at. But we also need to look at some of the negative effects. So we might increase the capacity, but we might have issues around thermal stability if we change the chemistry in that battery. That might mean we have to charge slower in the battery pack, and that means more time waiting around at the chargers. So we really need to think of those problems at the overall system level and in the end application. So it's still user focused, but we're thinking multiple levels away from what we might do. We can also consider whether there's other things we could do. So perhaps changing the shape of the battery would increase the number that you could pack into a battery pack, and that might be a better way to solve the problem at the vehicle level. The changes we make here might be absolutely fine for different application, and that's why understanding those applications is really important. And the moral of this is understanding the levels above is critical to effective design nowadays. So on a slightly more complex challenge here, as going beyond the bigger picture, one of the things with systems thinking is the problems are often not well defined. So when we start looking at problems here like reducing emission from transport, as we're trying to move towards net zero, there's a lot of different ways you might do this, and we don't necessarily know which problem to solve. One option is we might want to increase the use of electric vehicles, so we could incentivize them, put in more chargers, less tax, free parking for people, as we're seeing at the moment. But if we move beyond that system boundary, we need to also consider the energy production. And this has been a really critical question in a lot of the work I've done in the energy sector, both for automotive and aviation. Are we powering these vehicles from green energy, or are we powering them from more carbon emitting older technologies? So we can influence that. We can, as people, choose which energy supplier we want. So that's really the system boundary for us as a consumer, is both the vehicle and our energy suppliers. We might also want to look at things like energy cost and the other factors that influence that. So looking at that as one way of solving the problem, we might decide that we want to consider something else. So increasing the use of pedestrian powered transport like bicycles, putting in more cycle lanes, bike racks, and subsidies like cycle to work schemes. But there are factors at the city level that put people off cycling, and that's things like increased traffic, and also the security of your bike. Are there CCTV cameras there that might make it safer for you, or are people cutting through your locks, as we see happen a lot of the time in the city? And these have dynamic behaviors as well. So if we decide we want to do both, as we increase the use of electric vehicles, we might actually increase the amount of traffic on the road. If we provide those incentives and make them cheaper to use, we might say get less people on public transport, more vehicles on the road, and less people less likely to cycle. So we have to consider these at a top level as an overall network, and look at the dynamics of the problem here to try and work out which we want to solve. I also saw this early on in the pandemic, that one of the things we did was we started an organization and actually looked at PPE manufacture, and within a month we had full injection molded face shields. But when we decided to go down the PPE route, we were also looking at which problems were valuable for the hospitals, speaking to a lot of the medics to see whether we wanted to get involved with the ventilator challenge, for instance, as we had a group of engineers and a huge engineering capacity. So we actually had to look at the overall systems and decide which was going to be the most valuable and which we could achieve. I also want to talk briefly about systems engineering. So building the right product right here. And that's a problem that we see in industry as the complexity and the robustness of our products increases. So here we have some simple products in the bottom left-hand corner of things that you might have traditionally seen. We move up in complexity as we get more connectivity, more complex products, but also in more robustness. And we're seeing these as our products get more connectivity. So we see more IoT and internet connected products. We need to think more about that robustness. We need to think about security. We need to think about the safety of life implications of things like self-driving vehicles. And as we move up in complexity, it gets harder and harder to engineer products with traditional ways. So in the bottom corner, systems engineering and systems thinking is useful. It's some of the things we talked about with the battery, of actually helping build better products, looking at composability, so having different options, different product lines. As we then move up in the complexity, systems engineering techniques like requirements management are necessary to help us manage that complexity without using the traditional sort of paper methods and PowerPoints that have been used in design. And then as we move up in robustness, it's mandated. So things like requirements management and requirements traceability become more and more important as we move into automotive, medical, and industrial safety products. So it's critical to think about that as well as the actual systems thinking and how we think about the problems. So how can we change? Just to summarize, I want to give you a few ideas of what you might be able to do. So the first is seeing systems. So you should start to think about problems holistically. Look at everything as a system. Try and see what its behaviors are and how they emerge from a combination of parts. We also want you to look up, to start validating that you're solving the right problems. So that's thinking about the layers above. I've seen plenty of examples where people have spoken to engineers in their customers' companies, and they found that the problem that they're solving is not the biggest problem they have. And there's often unique things that you can build into your design that differentiate you from the competitors. I also want you to look outside the system. So understanding how your system relates to the world around it. What's the connections there? What's the context of that system? What's the boundary? What are the interfaces? This is where we often see problems in design where people miss things. We want you to consider the relationships. So often these complex and messy problems, if you can analyze the relationships between parts of the system and dynamic behaviors, we can build better systems by having that understanding. Once you've decided what you're building, it's then taking an approach where you can decompose that. So front-loading the design process, using some of the design thinking techniques and trying to learn as early as possible, considering all these different perspectives and stakeholders. And that's also key. It's this pre-work, not rework. So use design thinking approaches. Anything you can do low cost, whether it's prototyping, whether it's modeling, gaining that understanding is a good way of having those system concepts and learning more from your stakeholders to bring them back into your product design. So I hope that's given you a brief overview, and I'm happy to take any questions when they come through later through the chat, or feel free to get in touch if there's an interest in discussing further. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Tim. I love that preview rather than reworking things approach. So yeah, I think as somebody else with a systems engineering background, I'm kind of aware that we sometimes get a reputation of being a bit geeky and a bit intense and sort of process heavy. But I think if we can take the best bits of that thinking and mix them in with that agile sort of design thinking type approach, absolutely, I think there's something really amazing there. And yeah, especially around asking that sort of fundamental question of, are we doing the right thing with our innovations? Really key.
It's one of the biggest things I see in the companies I work for is there's a lot of pragmatic approaches, and because a lot of the system engineering has come out of aerospace and defense, it's traditionally followed very heavyweight industrial processes given the nature of the products. But there's a lot of simple things that people can be doing that are really good engineering practices, but we've not necessarily evolved our engineering methods as quickly as we've evolved the technologies we're working on.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks. Next, we've got Matthew. So after a pretty significant stint doing communications engineering in the army, coming out and studying physics, our next speaker also has a systems engineering background, but has taken things in quite a different direction. So fascinated by the more human-centered side of design, Matthew Mullen has contributed to the growth and impact of design at Thales. And I'm excited to hear your journey, Matthew, how you've worked to embed design within the organisation. So yeah, over to you.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Abby, and thanks for the opportunity to talk today. So what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes or so is really take you on a whistle-stop tour of the story of design at Thales, and some of the challenges that we faced, and then pose some questions about where we go next at the end. Before I do that, for those of you that don't know Thales, we're a technology and engineering company that develop technical solutions, systems, products and services into the aerospace, space, ground transportation, defense and security markets. We've got approximately 80,000 people in 68 countries worldwide. And the really important thing to understand, and probably linking back to the previous talk, is that we're very, very engineering technology centric in terms of our culture. So landing design and pushing design-led approaches within the group has not been an easy task. So moving on to the story of design, it really comes in 3 acts: the undercover years, the transformation years, and the emergence of Thales design. So if we cast our minds back to 2009, there was an executive learning expedition that went out to Silicon Valley. And while they were there, they discovered design thinking, companies such as Jump Associates, Frog Design, IDEO, Stanford D School. And that really got the cogs thinking and led to a number of projects with Stanford D School between 2009 and 2012. And they were exploring things like the better use of underwater drones, how we can redesign helicopter cockpits, and the future of cinematography. And all of these projects helped the organization learn how design thinking works, created some really innovative outputs, but the company at the time found it almost impossible to exploit those outputs within its existing culture. So in 2012, it was decided to bring design thinking inside the company with the formation of the first design center. And this coincided with a really big push on innovation in Thales at the time, and also the dreams and the desires of a man called Didier Boulay, who's now our first chief design officer. So a design center is pretty much based on the model you see at Stanford. It's 5 things. It's a multidisciplinary team. So people that come from an engineering and business and artistic background, but always with a professionally trained designer at the core. So someone who's learned their craft at design school. It's a creative space where teams can run their projects, run workshops with clients and users, can externalize their data on the walls, they can prototype, they can hack. And it's a set of design-led innovation methods. So not just the model-based that we discovered at Stanford, but also things like value proposition design, business model design, and more future-focused techniques around strategic foresight in design fiction and speculative design. And it's also a set of values and mindsets. So again, borrowed from Stanford, or maybe inspired by Stanford, things like craft and clarity, coping with uncertainty, being an entrepreneur, and embracing experimentation. So if we cast our minds now to the current day, or 2021, that initial design center has grown to a network of 13 design centers across Thales Group. We've got over 60 full-time practitioners. We've delivered over 100 significant projects, thousands of workshops, and we've trained even more people in the basics of design thinking and design-led innovation in the company. Now, if we look at that timeline, you can really see an uptake in the growth of that network from pretty much the end of 2018, 2019. And that's because it coincides with a significant period for Thales. And it really represents the transition to Act 2, something we call the transformation years. So in 2018, Thales decided to invest heavily in digital with a number of major acquisitions. So the acquisition of Gemalto and another digital company called Guavos. And at the same time, it established 3 digital factories across the group, roughly 250 people who were pushing a new model of digital product development. And as part of that model, they had designers at the core, so designers in every agile squad. At the same time, those factories are responsible for really helping the wider organization transform and take this more agile design-led approach to what they do. And that led to the creation of 7 transformation work streams. And work stream 1, you'll see there, is something called a focus on user experience. And Didier Boulay, by virtue of founding the Design Center, was invited to lead that work stream. Pretty soon after, by virtue of my experience in the design system journey, I was invited to join him. And the first thing we did is we reframed that from a focus on user experience to a focus on user experience design, recognizing you don't get a great user experience without great design, and recognizing that you don't get great design without a great underlying design capability. So the transformation became about the design capability. At the same time, we went away to our executive sponsors and we really said, look, this is a digital transformation. Are we limited in our ambitions for design in the company to digital, or should we address the global context? And the message was very clear: go away and address the global context. And so what you see here is really a model that's very, at a high level, aligned with the product development life cycle. We called it the design continuum. And we looked at where all the design kind of touch points are along that continuum, from the early work we do in technology research through to the innovation space where Design Center sits, through to UX, UI, product design and engineering, service design, customer experience and product policy in the marketing space. And it really started to help us think about the diversity of design, and that design as a concept is not any one thing. It's highly dependent upon the context in which it's practiced. So that led us through a period of exploration of thinking about how you actually structure a design capability in a company. And so we went and looked at the external market at different companies, conducted benchmarks. We developed a capability assessment methodology internally to look at where the good spots of design already were in a company, where design was completely absent. And it was all based around 5 pillars. So how you lead design, how you manage design, how you make design relevant and valued in the business units. So this isn't a top-down imposition. This is working very closely with the businesses who make the money to look at the value of design, how we embed design in our HR and our learning structures, and how we grow and engender a kind of community and an identity for the designers in the company. And the population sits at approximately 230 designers across group at this moment. So obviously we're the transformation team, we're doing the thinking, we're continually engaging with our executive sponsors, and we're also continually engaging with a network of champions we've now built in the businesses. And that led to 2 breakthroughs at the end of 2019. The first was our first UX assembly, where we announced our ambition to create the Thales design organization and capability to the top 100 leaders in the company. And the second came a month later in December with approval from the Thales XCOM to proceed with scoping the Thales design system. And that's the point that transitions from all this good thinking around transformation into something that's going to become tangible and embedded within the organization. So it's really the start of Act 3 and the early seeds of the Thales design entity. And I think the establishment of Thales design really is a pivotal moment in the history of design at Thales, because it really represents the formalization. So we're moving away from all of the different perceptions of design, a lot of the innovation theatre that surrounds it, towards something that's recognized and is seen as something that's legitimate in the organization. And it was organized on the 3 pillars you see here. So governance, what are the structures that we need to put in place to enable the different communities in the different areas of that continuum to be orchestrated and to coordinate with each other? Design ops, how do we operationalize design? So how do we manage design? How do we strategize? How do we work with the other functions in the company, engineering, marketing, technology? But what are the practices, the processes, the tools that we need as well? And then the last one here is the design system. And this is really about how do we make design visible in all of the products, the services, the experiences that we create. And importantly, how within that do we articulate and really transmit the values, the brand values and the brand architecture of the company. So just going into that, 2021, that saw us launch the design system for digital, recognizing that that's the starting point for scaling. Well, let me go back. Recognizing that's the start point for scaling to a design system beyond digital, so more into the industrial design and the product design space. We established a full-time team of 6 designers and developers and an extended network of contributors from across the businesses, something we call the guild. And that ensured that the development of the design system wasn't top down again. It represented the needs of the diverse businesses within Thales. And they did a fantastic job over 9 months, launching the first release of the design system. It was obviously branded and named as Quantum internally. The second strand here is the initiation of something called the Design Language Project. And this is a longer term project that's really looking at how we create that link between the brand values, the brand architecture of Thales and its purpose, how that is expressed within the design system, especially when we move beyond digital and into physical product, and also then how that's translated as a very clear aspect of the experience that our users of those products and services have. So that's a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of a period of around 10, 12 years. And we ask what next? Well, everything that I've presented to you there is fundamentally about creating better products, better services, better experiences, about making sure there's better alignment with the purpose and the brand across that continuum. And ultimately is going to, increase the competitiveness of the company, increase our ability to make money. And it's all very nice and human-centered. However, we're starting to see the emergence of the ESG agenda. And so these are really complex systemic issues like climate change, like biodiversity, sustainability. And Thales is not alone in asking the big questions about what is the role of a big company like us in contributing positively to these issues. And we might be tempted to think, well, we've got this design capability, we can just map that to these problems and crack on. And it's not as simple as that. These are less human-centered at an individual level, and they've become more about the collective interests of humanity in general. And so there's a big question about how we translate the foundations that we're starting to lay in the first 3 acts to a potential act 4, where that design capability can be evolved and built upon to address the bigger systemic challenges that we all face. And so I'm just going to wrap up here with a few personal reflections on this journey. And the first one, the high level bit, is scaling design means many, many things. First and foremost, for a big organization like Thales, it's really about formalizing design so that it can be understood in terms of the culture. So for an engineering culture, it's always things about governance, it's about operations, it's about those kind of issues. That in itself creates legitimacy and gives you a platform for scaling design in different directions. It's about embracing the broader potential of design, not just being focused on the traditional areas in product design, for example, but maybe addressing strategy, maybe addressing marketing and other topics. And also about preparing to address those emerging contexts, so the really big, hairy, systemic issues, and working out how we take that capability and maybe we connect to the systems thinking view of the world that we heard previously, maybe complexity scientists, maybe artists and other disciplines, to contribute to making an impact in these spaces, but not necessarily solving the problems, because we're recognizing that they're constellations of many dynamic moving problems. And so that's what's going to occupy us and help us build upon those first 3 acts and set Thales on the direction of an act 4. So I've discussed a lot during that discussion there. My details have been provided on the first slide. I'm more than happy to connect with anybody who's got questions or wants to have a deeper discussion after this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. And you'll be pleased to know, and you will have noticed perhaps already, that Matthew is one of the members of our board. So we're definitely going to benefit from the insights that he shared there. The things that struck me, as well as the sort of the evolution of the theatre, as it were, of the transformation through acts, and we need to think about the cast and the stakeholders and the script, as it were, that we go through, that was the external inputs that stimulated this. So first it was digital, and I think we've seen that have a massive impact on the way that organizations have taken up design. And now, and one of the reasons actually why the board is kind of excited that we think we can make this happen now is that ESG stuff. It does seem as if the existential crisis that's affecting us all and all of the organizations that we work in is a catalyst for change that we as a community should grab hold of and execute. So our next 3 speakers are going to focus on kind of more specific positive changes that design can bring. First, we're going to start with Kat, and Kat Drew from the Design Council. And everyone who's experienced the thinking and the curation that the Design Council has done around sort of design for the planet has been inspired. I think we can see that campaign is really targeted at the design community, but clearly has implications well beyond that. So we're excited, Kat, to hear more about how that translates and what's happening next. Over to you.
Great, thank you so much. And it's a real pleasure to be here. So thank you for inviting me to share a bit about Design for Planet. And I suppose I first wanted to start out with that bit of context. So we know that design shapes the world. everything around us almost has been designed, some of it very, very well, and some of it very badly. And the bad design has, in a way, contributed to the climate crisis that we find ourselves in. So the clothes that we wear, the environments we surround ourselves in, the products and services that we use are all designed. And as I've said, you know, the climate crisis clearly here. We've heard about heat waves in Russia, flooding across the UK, as well as in the Mekong Delta. And it's not just affecting humans, obviously, it's affecting biodiversity. And that is what's causing it to all speed up, because actually the biodiversity in nature keeps the planet in balance. And it's not just a crisis that affects us all equally, it is kind of emblematic of deep systemic inequalities. The richest 1% of the world produce 50% of the world's carbon. So people in the global south are experiencing a crisis that they just didn't cause. And even in the UK, we know that kind of Black communities in South London are facing massive issues around air pollution, which again is not shared by those living in rich neighbourhoods. So design has a huge role here. Now, going back. Design has a huge role. And first of all, I wanted just to share some kind of hot off the press stats from our latest design economy report, which is obviously for most of us have come through the economic value of design. So design can increase productivity and growth. £1 invested in design gives you £20 back. Fresh off the press, new stats show that design is now worth 97 billion GVA to the UK economy. That's grown 20% in the last that's grown 15% in the last 3 years, twice as fast as the UK average. But also design has this huge effect on the environment. So 80% of the environmental impact of any new product is determined at design stage. 40% of the UK's total carbon footprint comes from the construction industry. 60% of the emission reductions needed will require societal and behaviour changes, which is, of course, design is really good at creating things that people want to use and are kind of joyful experiences. So design has got this huge role to play. And the scale of what we need to do, the way that we need to shift our energy consumption, the way we need to change our patterns of mobility and transport, the way we're going to have to change how we consume is enormous. We're going to have to redesign almost every aspect of our lives. And that's why we've changed our mission. So this is us in Design Council in 1944, when we were set up really to use design to promote design and the manufacture of industrial goods largely as a way of rebuilding the post-war economy. Slightly staring on the edge of another war today, but 76 years later, the biggest crisis we're facing at the moment is, of course, the planetary crisis. And so that's why earlier last year we decided to create a new mission, Design for Planet, which is to support and galvanise it's not 1.69 million anymore, it's fresh off the press, 1.9 million strong design community in the UK to design with the welfare of people and the planet at its heart. And the first thing we did, as Chris said, is we did a Design for Planet festival in November alongside COP last year. It was very focused on designers, both in the UK and abroad. We had 50% of the 6,000 who joined us were abroad. But we're going to plan to do it again this year rather, and the focus will be much more on businesses. So I hope lots of you will be able to come along. That's a picture of the people who were there in person. So just to quickly run through some inspiring examples, and I'll go through these fairly quickly, but I think design has got a huge role to play, and businesses obviously are kind of the charging factor of this. So to design sustainable places which are adaptable to climate change, that are well transported and housed, to design in a circular way so that we're regenerating kind of natural resources, not extracting them, and to design products and services that make it easy, inclusive and attractive for everyone to be able to live more sustainably. So we've seen wonderful examples in Port Loop in Birmingham, a housing development that is low carbon, but is also really encourages all of its communities to walk, to cycle, to to recycle, and to plant their own food. And wetlands, which are a great example of designing with nature. Nature is the designer here. It's the one that's producing the flood defense, which the wetlands are so good for. Also a source of food, but they're great places for people as well to walk. It's good for people's mental health, physical health, and they're, economic tourist attractions as well. In terms of products, lots of conversation about circular design. This is London's first fully reusable takeaway box, which obviously is a physical product, but has got AI-enabled technology to make it kind of reusable, recyclable. And many in the fashion industry are thinking about how they can reuse materials to create fashion that is not as extractive as the kind of the traditional. And in terms of services and products, using the best technology, as we've heard about today. This is a light emitting sonar device that sits in fishing nets to repel the fish that we don't want to catch, to prevent overfishing. But the use of design here is obviously making sure that that device can actually be used on a fisher on a fishing boat in Scotland when the waves are rocking around and it's very unstable. And equally, design can make things just beautiful and attractive and joyful to use. So .commoney is a credit card which also has not just a credit limit, but a carbon limit. So design has got, there's loads more examples of these, and our role at Design Council is to really share and promote them. And I'm sure within this network, you're all sitting on loads of other ideas that you've either designed, that you've got in your head and you'd like to design or produce, that you know that inspire you, and we'd love to hear about them. But as everyone's been saying in the last couple of panel interventions, that design does need to change. So this is Don Norman, the kind of grandfather of UX and product design. And he said, you know, things have been designed by people over thousands of years. And if people designed it, maybe design can save it, but everything has to change. And so last year at Design Council, we created our systemic design framework. And I'm not going to go through all of it now for time, but essentially it's based in 3 sections. So it's 4 characteristics, 6 principles, and an expanded process. And you can see, those of you who are kind of observant can see in the expanded process, it's still got at its heart the double diamond, which is our world famous design framework, which we've been using for 20 years, but it's got loads of invisible stuff around it. But I'm just going to focus on the principles, I think, and just want to pull out 3 things. Here we go. And these principles, I think, are a really good way of having an initial conversation between a designer and a business who are at the start of their design journey. They're non-confrontational, and they help just get everyone on the same page about designing in a more kind of holistic, systemic way. Not just thinking about the pound sign, but also thinking about people and planet. So it starts with people and planet at its heart. It's around also being inclusive and welcoming difference, because we know this is an unequal situation we're in. All the points from earlier about zooming in and out, seeing this as a, understanding design's role in the bigger picture, collaborating and connecting, of course, testing and growing ideas, and being circular and regenerative. So in terms of zooming in and out, previous speakers have made the point about needing to think systemically, and design absolutely needs to do that, but also not to forget the kind of beautiful way that design understands individual people's needs and designs for that. But also understands that there are multiple benefits of a really good design. And we're just about to publish our value framework, which will help designers and businesses be able to measure not just the economic, but the social and environmental and democratic value of design. Putting planet at the heart of the brief is probably the easiest thing you can do to start a conversation. And I think in the chat, Anita will share a short 90-second film which makes that point really beautifully, which I'd encourage everyone to play at the start of of a brief. And then finally, inclusive and welcoming difference. Can't underline more the importance that design shapes the world and it needs to reflect the society it shapes. Currently, it really does not. So as well as good co-design, we think at Design Council that we need to make sure that design is really reflective of society. At the moment, it's 77% male, so it's really not. So what we're doing for designers out there, and again, as a last thing I'd encourage you to do, is fill out a short survey around kind of demographics so we can really dig into what is driving some of that. So I'll finish there, and I'll finish with a quote from Kate Raworth, who we talked to as we were developing our mission, and she said, "If you're not designing for planets, what planet are you on?" Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Really strong message there and incredibly topical. We're really pleased to be able to work with Design Council on getting that message out to the wider innovation community. And yeah, your video is great, so I'd really recommend if people get a chance to watch that, to do so. We'll put the video, the link to that video in the chat, and we'll send it out afterwards along with the recordings of the presentations, of course. So next, we've got Adrian Westaway, founder of Special Projects, an award-winning design and innovation agency based in London that works with mid-sized startups and larger companies like Google, P&G and Sonos. And Adrian and his team do amazing things, literally magical things. Adrian is actually a magician, working with technical and complex products and through a research-focused, thoughtful, respectful approach to design. The implications of design and the insights it can offer in terms of doing the right thing are clever and clear. Adrian, over to you.
Thanks very much, Abby. So hello, everybody. My name is Adrian, and I run a design studio with my wife, Clara, called Special Projects, based in London. And I wanted to share a story about just one project today, really talking about the impact that design can have very, very early on in a project, at literally from the kind of brief writing stage, and just showing the impact that it can have on altering the trajectory of a project really, really early on. So Abby kind of introduced the studio, but very quickly, we're a kind of boutique innovation studio. There's just 7 of us based in sort of London, Portugal, and Amsterdam now. We work on really, really diverse projects. So about a third of our work is with large companies, tech companies and consumer goods and various kind of large organizations. And then another third of our work is with startups. And then the last third is actually our own projects. And there's not enough time to kind of talk about all of them, but we're constantly trying to come up with new ideas and things we can share. And there's a lot on our website if you're interested about that. But today I wanted to talk about a project with a really large company called Samsung. And just to give you a little bit of an idea about the studio, my wife, Clara Gajero, and I founded it after graduating from the Royal College of Art. But we have 2 very different backgrounds. I'm from an electronic engineering background, so very kind of tech focused. I kind of run to technology to solve most problems. Whereas Clara's background really is in industrial design, where she studied in Italy. And so we have like a kind of very strong digital and physical mix, which didn't make much sense about 10 years ago when we started, but is making a lot more sense as products and services kind of merge between the digital and physical now. The other thing that's really important to us as a studio, and what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about this morning, is involving people in the research. We were really fortunate to study at the Helen Hamlin Centre, which is a fantastic place, all about exploring new user-centered research methodologies. And any project we do, with whatever the timescale, will always involve people and talk to them. It's the kind of source of all inspiration. And the last thing, as Abby mentioned, that's really important to us as a studio is magic. This is actually like a magic trick that we, I think, did for a Christmas card a while ago. But really, I've been a magician since I was 11 years old. I'm in the magic circle. But what we're really interested in is not creating tricks, but in magic, there's always a sort of secret technology, but that has to remain secret. And then there's an experience that people perceive. And there's a technology on one side and the experience on the other. And our job is to try and hide that technology and really focus on the experience that's going to be created and the feelings people are going to have. And there's a lot of parallels with that and design. So really quickly, I'm going to show you in the remaining sort of 7 minutes how we used research to find a dip in a user experience and then try to fix that dip in a magical way. And the brief we had at the beginning from Samsung, and this was in 2010, so this is really, really old, but we're actually allowed to talk about this, and that's why I'm sort of sharing it. The brief was, can we design a new phone for older adults? We were really concerned that brief was kind of putting us in quite a narrow space creatively. So we worked with Samsung to rephrase the brief to make it about how can we help older adults to use and enjoy mobile technology. So moving away from the solution and just making it about what we're trying to get out of it, which is using mobile technology, not necessarily making a new phone. And when we started the project, we were actually quite recent graduates, and a lot of products at the time designed for aging were designed with this image in mind, very kind of negative, stigmatizing image of aging. What we wanted to do was instead really focus on the positive aspects of aging and really work hard to discover people's abilities rather than get sort of bogged down by their disabilities. So we kind of had this quite cheesy Getty image up on the studio to kind of remind us to kind of look for an optimistic new angle on the problem. And when we did some really early research, and there's so many ways of doing this, but at the time, the quickest was to literally go into the Carphone warehouse and pretend we were buying a phone for our grandmothers and just listen to what they offered. And these were the sorts of things that they offered us in 2010, but amazingly, many of them sort of still exist in various formats. Now, what's amazing is none of them have enough digits to even dial a number. So if you're old, you're not allowed to just have 10 digits to dial numbers. You're just given 4 or 5 speed dials, and you can only have 4 or 5 friends. It's a very kind of stigmatizing solution. And at the time, I think I said my grandmother was about 70. And I know for a fact that this really, this would really be quite a stigmatizing thing to give her. The other thing is they all had a big SOS button on them to sort of remind you that you're going to die any minute, and this is the button you're going to press. It's a very kind of negative thing. And I remember my mom telling me that she would slap me in the face if I gave that to her. So we kind of realized that the current approach was very stigmatizing, and then we undertook some research in people's homes. And there's not enough time to go into all the things that we did there, but it was really important to go into people's homes and observe the context that they would be using these things, mobile devices in. And we learned a lot about that. And we purposely spoke to people who were quite different. These weren't huge studies. These involved maybe 8 to 10 people, but we made sure we had, young, we even had a child at one point, someone who wasn't part of the sort of assumed audience, but people with varying degrees of knowledge about technology, people who lived in groups, people who lived alone, people who lived in couples. And we brought this research throughout Europe into Norway and Italy as well. Again, purposely picking quite different countries, Italy and Norway, culturally very, very different. And we ran some workshops. And we tried to understand people's top level aspirations about what a mobile phone could do for them. And you probably noticed there's a man on the left writing on a banana. And what we did is we actually gave people bananas as a sort of, quite comical tool and asked them to tell us, if this banana was your dream phone, tell us what it could do. And it was amazing what they told us these phones could do. One of them had, this is in Italy, had tutto vocale, everything vocal written on the banana. So they wanted to be able to speak to the phone and make it do things for them. At the back, there's a button to watch films. They wanted to watch films on their phone. Now, what's really interesting is we said these bananas could be your dream phone. They could do anything you want. But the things that the people were choosing were things that already were possible on existing phones. They weren't asking for something new. They were asking for something that already existed. You can see on this banana that the gentleman looked after his grandchildren a lot, and he had a button that he wanted to push to make the kids happy and just essentially be quiet. You can do that with an iPad. If you put an iPad in front of a bunch of kids, that they probably will essentially be happy and be quiet for a while. So we were actually able to go back to the client and say, maybe there isn't a problem with the user and maybe there isn't a problem with the device, but there's some sort of barrier between them. And what we did is spent and put our time and energy to trying to discover what that barrier was. And the barrier was actually happened at the moment that people bought a phone and opened the box for the first time. And you can see there's Duncan, who's in his 20s, trying to open a phone box for the first time, and Beverly, who was in her mid 60s. And the first thing Duncan does is opens the box and plays with the phone, and he figures it out. First thing Beverly does is actually looks at the manual and starts to read it. And we all know that that manual has not really been written to be used. It's sort of just a legal requirement. So we were able to understand that there was a massive dip in the user experience at the moment of opening the box, and we wanted to focus on that and really improve that experience. So I'm gonna show you a video which shows our solution, and the idea was essentially to take all these disparate elements, the user, the manual, the device, and the box, and bring them together into one holistic experience. And critically, the solution isn't actually to design a new phone, but actually to design the way that an existing phone gets into your hands. Now, I'm gonna just in the interest of time, just ask the team to play the video now, which shows the concept that we created. Thank you. So I'll just talk over this. So what we did is we took the existing dimensions of a phone and we redesigned it to become a set of 2 hardbound books. And books are really familiar objects. Many people know just instinctively how to handle a book and how to turn the pages. And the first book is the book that helps you setting up your phone. And the first thing you see is the SIM card, because you maybe in 2010, you might not have encountered a SIM card before. The next thing you see is where that SIM card goes in the phone. And so the phone is sort of hidden in the book, and we're just revealing the bits that you need to see at the right moment. The next thing you see is where the battery is, and then the next thing you see is where the battery goes in the phone. And I don't know if you can remember what it was like in 2010 when you bought a phone. You often had to take it apart just to put it back together again the minute you'd bought it. Now that's fine if you're comfortable with technology, but if it's the first time you're doing it and you're alone, that can be a really daunting task and quite terrifying, and require a lot of often require a lot of assistance. So we were trying to kind of respectfully use the packaging to explain how to kind of use the phone. The next book is the main manual, and we spend a lot of time looking at the wording and arranging the order of the wording. But the most important thing here is actually we cut a hole in the middle of the manual and put the phone right in the middle of the actual instructions. And that came from just watching people learn how to use phones. And quite often you'll see them hold the manual in one hand and then the phone in the other. And there's a lot of going back and forth. So what we tried to do is unify that experience and put the phone in the middle and have all the instructions point around the device. It's kind of like in a Bond film when there's a sort of gun or a whiskey bottle sort of hidden in a Bible. It's like a very old method, but used in a different way. So I think I'm kind of sort of out of time now, but I really just wanted to show a kind of live real project and go into a little bit of detail about how a design-led approach very, very early on in the project can have such a huge impact on the whole trajectory of that project. So thanks very much, and I think we'll pass you over to Meryl.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for that, Adrian. I really love your work on that particular project, but in general, the power of design is really so clear. So yeah, last but by no means least, we've got a woman I'm personally a huge fan of. The final speaker is deeply passionate about diversity and inclusion in design and innovation, in terms of both the community and the products and services developed, and the two really are so interlinked. Lack of diversity, inclusion and innovation teams contributes and exacerbates inequalities and division. It impacts on profits, market share, society, individual experiences and the environment. Explicitly including new perspectives and experiences is the essence of good design. So I'm really delighted to be able to welcome Meryl Hall, CEO at Canerdifort. And yeah, over to you, Meryl.
Thank you, Abby, and thank you to everyone who's joined us this morning. We have been obviously talking quite intensively at you. I'm going to make this as quick as possible to enable some time for questions at the end. I wanted to talk a little bit about inclusivity and why it's so important and why actually it can provide everyone with a competitive advantage. I run an agency called KTNUK. We've been around since the 70s. I did not set it up. We have a team of just under 100, and we are able, through that team, to deliver user-centered innovation, design, and development. Inclusivity is hugely important for a whole number of reasons, some of which I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to start with some great examples of how design can enable or disable us. Now, some of you may have seen these, the Nike Go Fly shoes. These are brilliant because you can put them on and off without use of your hands. They are entirely able to do that just by placing your foot inside. And the way these have been designed are reflective of any age or stage, and the design has been created in a way to appeal to different target demographics whilst being accessible to all. Our mission at KD around design and inclusivity is about design for everyone. In 2015, 2016, we created our purpose of designing a better world. And for that, the definition of that really is about how we can create positive impact through the work that we do, and really putting that front and center. And the reason why that's so important is because, as we see from examples that exist, we have 1.8 billion people in the world today who are differently abled. And actually, what does that mean? That means $8 trillion in spending power. So this is the right thing to do, but clearly there's a commercial message there. And obviously from that perspective, this lady on the slide currently called Sam Latif, she's diversity and inclusivity director at Procter & Gamble, and doing some brilliant work in her field there. We may have be talking in the context of sort of broader accessibility, but equally we've got challenges that need to be resolved with gender inequality in design. Kat referenced that earlier, at 77% of designers in the UK being male. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But also there was a book published in 2019 by a lady called Caroline Criado Perez, which some of you may have read or been aware of, and she uses data in her book Invisible Women to talk about how the world is designed for men, predominantly by men. And this is one of the examples which is often talked about, the crash test dummy. And how ultimately, if you're 78 kilos and 5'10", it works beautifully. But if you're not, and your body ergonomically follows different lines less well, and these are the stats of that are related to a woman in the driving seat of a car and also the passenger seat. And it's not just within the field of car design; it stretches far beyond that. There were some stats released just this week, which Caroline Criado Perez was talking about in terms of thinking about cancer treatments and within the broader healthcare scenarios, and actually the risk of having an adverse event as a woman as part of your cancer treatment is 34% increased. And in terms of, if you look at that in immunotherapy, that goes up to 49%. So clearly there are challenges that need to be addressed here. Think it's niche? No, there's 3 numbers here, and this is also part of the economic reasons as to why this is so important. 85% of consumer products in the UK and Europe are chosen by women. Those decisions are made by women. When you look at that in terms of healthcare, that rises to 93%. And yet in the UK, when we look at product design, industrial design, from the report published by the Design Council in 2018, it's 5% women. And that is worse than architecture, that is worse than software programming. It is the worst discipline. And clearly it's something that needs to be addressed. Interestingly though, 50% of design education in industrial and product design in the UK is female. So clearly we are having a huge drop off, and a lot of the work that we've been doing at KD is around trying to understand that in greater depth and what that actually means. Well, what does that mean for us as consumers? It means that 50% of the population have been underserved. And this was a great example a few years back from Apple when they developed Apple Health, and there was no cycle tracking on the first edition of this. Considering the number of other features that were included, really quite an oversight from their perspective indeed. And as a reaction to this, KD, Canadian 4, a few years back, we launched an arm of our business called XX Equals, which is around female-centered innovation, design and product development. And most of the work that we do here at KD is around healthcare and wellness, and that's a particular area which is very underserved. And our team that features part of the XX Equals arm is 75% female, because it's not about excluding genders or excluding anybody at all. It's about creating a system of design allyship and how we can all be part of that. Our broader team at KD is 43% female. Our management team is 50% female, and our exec team is 50%. So clearly it can be done, but we're just not seeing that translate across other organizations, and clearly commercial advantages are being lost as a result. We clearly need to think about ensuring diverse perspectives are considered. We are not always our target audience. We need to really think about what that means. And as I mentioned earlier, also ensuring that all genders are part of that conversation. This is the fabulous Jess Ennis-Hill, who launched a brilliant app called Genis around cycle tracking. And I just wanted to cover off some of our core principles within XX Equals and maybe think about how that could be relevant to your organization. For us, it's really around open and real conversations and moving away from these areas that have historically been considered taboo to actually make them part of the conversation. You know, we see that with a lot of the pillars of female healthcare: menstruation, fertility, menopause. We need to all be unafraid to have these conversations. Diverse perspectives develop diverse ideas. By having a team that can mirror the people that they're designing for, that just makes sense. You know, and not just from a equality perspective, but also thinking about that from socioeconomic, from ethnic diversity, from neurodiversity. All of these are central to our thinking. Stretch boundaries, challenge the brief, challenge societal attitudes, think about things differently. How can we really, really create something that answers the need? And also, don't forget emotion. It's not just about function. We're all people. We're not users. We're not consumers. We're not citizens. Well, we're all of those things. But underneath it all, we are people. And by creating an experience which can be elevated and really creating something that does deliver on the emotional connection, you're going to create a better product. And also, it reduces risk. It reduces unknowns, having that broader diversity included, having all of us being part of the conversation. And finally, if anybody would like to talk about any of these things or would like to contact me, there are my details. I'd love to hear from you. Love to continue the conversation. Thank you all very much.
Thanks so much, Meryl. Yeah, really striking statistics in there, and I think general lack of awareness, but across the community. But I think through the network activity, hopefully we can look at how we can change some of that. So yeah, I think we're really tight for time. So we're keen to hear from you guys, from the audience, and we're going to go to a final Menti in a moment. Yeah, so what we've decided to do is we will put your questions, so we've got lots of questions there, we will put them to our speakers and we will record the responses to those and we will get those back to you within the next day or two. But in the meantime, we're really keen to get your views on the network and today's session and what's really inspiring you moving forward. We do have time for a question. So there's one that's came up about methods that people use, favourite methods for inspiring creativity. I'm wondering if we could come to some of our speakers on that one, and if we could. There was another question about methods for complexity and understanding uncertainty. So maybe if we go round, you can either give us your methods for creativity or methods for understanding complexity and uncertainty. Will we just go in the order that we ran this morning? Alison, can we come to you first?
Yes, I guess actually in the case of the Dosa project, one of the things we did very early on was to have lots of iterative mapping, and that was system mapping on looking at the service ecosystem, and we built those through interviews, observations, and we didn't see them as static objects, but as things that evolved over time. The other thing was to map the relationships that existed within a place. So I guess for me, as one of the first methods, apart from obviously the things like observation and sort of the focus groups, but from the sort of more design point of view, it's taking that information and creating understanding.
Listen, Tim, have you got thoughts on that question?
So I was thinking more on the standard approaches for exploring unintended consequences of designs. So the system dynamics, I think, is really important. Actually mapping out your system and what reinforcing and balancing loops. And I'll get the team to put a link to a really good gallery of ideas of that through one of the online tools. I think also when you're looking at more complex products, there's methods like failure mode effect analysis that you can look at how things go wrong, but generally considering emergent behaviors, looking at what would happen when you put two things together and thinking outside the box, thinking of the context in which your system sits is really important, particularly as different environments have different impacts on the products that you're developing.
Thanks, Tim. Matt, you got thoughts on either side of those?
Well, okay, so I'm going to come to the question, I think, in the chat here, the personal method you as an individual to get into your best creative mindset. And for me, two parts to this. The first one is, personally, if I want to be creative, I get out of my working environment. I get out into nature. I do a lot of walking and a lot of thinking, and I find there's a lot of creative thoughts that bubble up from being in a different environment. And then when it comes to working with a team and being focused creatively there, the pandemic's got in the way, because the best conditions for me are to be in a room, gaining energy from other people, having a dialogue and hitting the whiteboard and externalizing our discussions, externalizing our thoughts. I mean, in my experience, that just sets off a cascade of creativity.
Thanks, Matt. Maybe we can come to you next. Kat, we also had a question in the chat about should we be designing for growth? I'm wondering if you could pick up on that and maybe mention a method.
Yeah. So quickly on methods, I think as well as mapping the current system, I think it's really important to imagine what the future system could be and the potential of that. So asking if this, then what else? And some of the more speculative design methods. And I love going for a walk. That's probably my favourite method. In terms of growth, I think there's really interesting conversations about growth and degrowth happening. If you look about how growth is happening in nature, actually it's just not a one-way kind of continuous upward arrow. It's much more circular and cyclical. So actually growth becomes conservation and collapse and then regrowth, and thinking about it like that. But the other thing is to say that as well as economic value, really important to consider social and environmental value is on an equal footing, and measuring all those the same.
Thanks, Kat. Adrian, have you got thoughts on methods?
Yeah, I think probably the most valuable thing is I really like embracing the research stage and not thinking about research as validation, but as inspiration at the beginning. I think like too often it just sort of gets seen as one of these sort of boring bits of the process. But if you kind of try and reframe that and think about the research as trying to increase, you know, try and create as many opportunities of seeing something that you weren't expecting, by doing that in various ways, but essentially exposing the team to as many, you know, new perspectives on something. I think that just makes the whole creative process so much easier. And then a little sneaky thing, you know, when we sort of structure projects, you know, we probably spend about a third of our time on research, about a third of our time on sort of coming up with concepts, and about a third of our time on how those concepts get materialized and communicated and designed. And actually, you know, secretly, while you're doing the research, you're really kind of secretly coming up with concepts while you're having those conversations. So if you have a lot of time talking to people, you know, several weeks of research at the beginning, your brain is, whether you like it or not, is already beginning to think. And I think that makes the day or the week that you have to kind of come up with the ideas so much easier.
Fab, thanks, Adrian. Meryl, you got thoughts on methods?
I think there's some brilliant ideas and concepts that we've already talked about. For me, really, unsurprisingly, it's about challenge and actually not just putting yourself in a room with lots of people that sound like you and look like you and think like you. How can you really be open in terms of that creativity? And that's about being challenged and thinking about it differently. We often think outside of the sectors or the parameters that we're working within when we're looking for that inspiration, and really go for sort of a broader diversity in terms of opinion leaders or you know, seeking inspiration in areas that at first sight might not seem that relevant, but when you start thinking about it from more of a helicopter view, have the same challenges and interesting solutions to those. So be open and be open to challenge.
Thanks so much, Meryl. So yeah, we are going to have to wrap it up there, folks. I think there's so much more we could say, so much more discussion that we could have, but I think we've got the Menti responses there. People have clearly been inspired by all the talks this morning, as have I, and I'm sure Chris as well. So yeah, just thank you for joining us. Hopefully you can join us this afternoon too, where we will be solely focused on Q&A. So come along, ask your questions then. Big thanks to the team at KTN, in particular Leanne, Matt and Anita, who've pulled out all the stops to make this happen. And finally, a huge thank you to our speakers, Alison Trenderville, Tim Kirby, Matt Millen, Kat Drew, Adrian Westaway and Meryl Hall. So thank you, folks. Join Chris and I at 1 p.m. for the session focused on the practicalities of making it all happen, and another great panel.
The Design Innovation Network convenes curious, courageous and collaborative thought leaders and challenge holders, charging them with finding answers to some of the world's most complex innovation challenges, to help introduce positive change and to shape our collective future. We asked some of the community, what is the most powerful aspect of design?
If it looks right, it is right. And I think that's a really important aspect, the confidence that can be generated as a result of a good design is really powerful and compelling.
One of the most powerful aspects of design is its ability to bring together people with completely different experience, insights and expertise, and create an environment for them to work together collaboratively and productively to create solutions that never would have come from just one individual set of stakeholders.
What is the future of design?
I think in the future we're going to need to get better at designing things that don't create negative impact on the environment, but instead create positive impacts that regenerate our world.
I believe we should be focused on the challenge, not the solution. I also believe that diversity is important in terms of the team, that it mirrors the society that we are designing for, but ultimately the designer needs to become a conduit for the end user.
Designers will see more people and non-humans as co-designers in their process. So thinking about businesses, communities, AI as a designer, and also nature, of course.
Design will be integrated into everything we do rather than some sort of separate specialism.
What is the most exciting opportunity for design?
Design has changed and has this potential to be directed, if you like, towards positive change. I think that also provides a series of challenges for designers in terms of understanding who they are and how they operate, but it's very exciting, the opportunity for design to take on much greater and more strategic challenges.
We have the real opportunity to help finding and communicating a new vision of progress that is different, more responsible toward a sustainable and inclusive world.
I think the biggest thing that will drive change probably hasn't been invented yet. I think that's one of the most exciting things about design. There's always something new to develop.
If you're courageous, collaborative and curious about how we can use design to deliver positive change and better innovations, join, contribute, change.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Design Innovation Network launch. This morning we heard some fantastic perspectives on design and innovation. I'm so inspired by our speakers and the wider community, the conversations that were happening there too. Hopefully you, if you were part of that, you feel the same. If you're like me, you'll probably have a million ideas and possibilities and questions running around in your mind. And this afternoon is a chance to hear from people who have design under their fingernails, people who live and breathe it, who have learned from experience and have a wealth of insight and knowledge on how to make it happen well, and what to avoid.
Yeah, and there's a chance for you to ask questions. So again, please do type your questions into the chat and we'll try to pick up on them.
We see so much design used as an afterthought, tagged on at the end of a project, and this really misses the point. The big opportunity for design is upfront in understanding the context of the problem, and in doing so, ensuring that the solutions and impacts of the solutions make sense, that they're doing the right thing.
And this came up a lot this morning as well. It's a huge responsibility now that we're so much more aware of the issues that we all face, the planet faces. So we have a big responsibility in developing new technologies and products and services, and the policies that shape the decisions that we all make. And it's about understanding and grappling with the complex and the complicated, the unknown, and applying sort of curiosity, creativity, and care to come up with new and better ways of doing things. But we only got 50 minutes, so we need to press on.
Yeah, thankfully we've got a great panel to help us do that. Let's crack on and meet our panelists, get the down low on how we can use design to best effect. So our first panelist has built an amazing business developing innovative breast forms for, amongst other things, women who have had mastectomies. Design has shaped how this panelist understands her customers and differentiates her product and service. The insights and the empathy are tangible, having gone from strength to strength through Innovate grant funding and having now secured private investment. We've got loads to learn and I'm looking forward to hearing our thoughts. Please welcome Samantha Jackman from Boost. Co-founder and CEO of GoodBoost, an innovative digital health social enterprise. For our second panellist, design has been transformational for Ben. He's used it to differentiate what GoodBoost do in ways that have unlocked real vision. Design has been instrumental to delivering positive change. Ben's also used this design-led approach to help him secure grant funding, which has been integral to him growing his social enterprise startup successfully. I'm really excited about the insights we're going to gain from Ben Wilkins. So thank you for joining us today, Ben. Our next panellist is a knowledge transfer advisor from Innovate UK KTN. He looks after, scopes, builds and monitors projects on a specific type of programme called KTP, Knowledge Transfer Partnerships. In these programmes, talented graduates or postgraduates are embedded in forward-thinking businesses, linking them to the UK's world-class universities, delivering sector-leading products, services and processes. KTP offers great opportunity for some of the design community to do exciting, disruptive work. In addition to all this, Mark has a wealth of experience in design and is heavily involved in professional engineering institutions, including IMechE, IET and IED. So Mark Lynch, really excited to have you on the panel and looking forward to hearing more about KTP and your design experience. And then as innovation leader for 3M, professor, visiting professor at Brunel and vice chair with the Institute of Engineering Designers, our next panellist has an abundance of experience using design in practice, from 5-person startups to large global organisations, and also in defining what good looks like through his work with BSI Design Management Standard and ISO Innovation Management System Standards. Ben Watson, welcome. And then as the innovation lead for design at Innovate UK, our final panellist is responsible for developing that organisation's national design strategy and has years of experience under his belt, both as a practicing industrial designer, working across many sectors, and with his oversight of hundreds of businesses that have benefited from Innovate UK's support to undertake design activity and grow their design capabilities. Big welcome to Ben Griffin. I think, yeah, we can't really let it go unnoticed that we do have 3 Bens on our panel, and a boost and a good boost. It's, yeah, in some ways not diverse, but I think we've got great perspectives, and people have been chosen not because they're called Ben or because they run a business with boost in the title, but because they've got valuable contributions to make. It's just worked out a little bit randomly. So Chris, can I hand over to you and
Sure.
We'll get going?
Sure, and I suppose I could also point out that the 3 with me as well, I suppose 4 of the panel are members of the advisory board for the Design Innovation Network. So we're having conversations already, and we will build on the things that we learn from the discussions that we have with you today. So I think the first question we wanted to hear about was your personal experiences of design and innovation, and I think we want to target this particularly at those people for whom, you know, design wasn't their starting point. So people who have been on this journey and had perhaps a bit of a transformation. So we're going to ask Ben Wilkins and Sam to address this, and then we'll open it out to the rest of you in a slightly broader way. But let's start with you, Sam. Can you tell us a bit about the design journey that you have been on?
Yes, so we started the design journey with Boost when my mum had breast cancer, which was around sort of 15, 16 years ago now. And she was given a breast prosthesis that looked a bit like this, which is a traditional way of making one. And my mum wasn't really able to engage with it. She found it was really hot and heavy and sweaty and wasn't comfortable for her to wear. And after talking to me a lot about it over the years, and me spending a lot of time online, ordering lots of different alternatives for her, we realised that what she was after, actually just didn't exist. So I met Rosie at work, and we were trying to talk about it. And I worked in education and arts and heritage. But it became clear that actually, if we were going to develop this kind of product, there wasn't somebody else who was going to do it for us. We might have to take it on ourselves. And that's kind of where we started that Boost journey. And what we have now is our innovative open structured breast form, which is lighter in area and is based on those issues that my mum had. But we soon found out that when we developed our human-centered design processes, that there were lots of other women who felt the same way that my mum did. And that process of reaching out to women, embedding that human-centered design principle, really helped us to refine and develop the product into what it is today.
And how did you come across design then? How did you deploy design?
A little bit by accident, I guess, because as you know, as I've just said, I'm not a designer. I had a background in arts and heritage and education. But really, design for me was quite intuitive, because what I cared about most was what these women were thinking and feeling. And I think that if you start from that point of empathy, then actually the design is quite straightforward. Mm-hmm. And working with Rosie, and then we had some support from the Design Council Spark programme, that really opened up those opportunities for us. And we probably wouldn't have been able to get where we are quite so quickly and quite so efficiently, and learn how to embody those principles in quite the same way without that initial and very early support. So that was kind of instrumental in our design journey.
Perhaps very briefly, could you tell us about Spark then? What did you gain from that?
So Spark is a kind of accelerator sort of seed program. We had a little bit of funding through that program. I think it was £15,000, but we had a lot of support. So there was regular meetings, regular get-togethers, lots of training, lots of different things that helped to introduce design-led thinking to you, which was what we were already doing, but we just didn't always frame it the same way. We didn't know that that's what we were doing sometimes. And that was really...
It is a kind of, as you say, with empathy, it's a kind of a natural starting point. Ben Wilkins, can you tell us a bit about your design and innovation journey?
Yeah, sure. So my background has nothing to do with design. I'm an osteopath that works in research as well. We were first introduced to design principles around 3 years ago, following some workshops delivered by the Design Council. We were on a social enterprise program as an organization working in solutions for an Asian society. And this introduces to models such as the double diamond, swim lanes, the importance of problem definition, understanding. As a team of clinicians and researchers, we thought we understood the problem. From a public health point of view, MSK conditions, musculoskeletal conditions like arthritis and back pain, they affect around 20 million people. Primary cause of disability, £5 billion a year goes on. It's second most common reason for sick leave and lost productivity. We understood the stats of the problem, but we didn't understand the problem. We know that exercise works for MSK conditions. It's one of the most clinically and cost-effective interventions, and that's the reason physiotherapists give exercise. But just because there's evidence for something doesn't mean people do anything. It's not that people don't know better, it's that they don't do better. And as Good Boost, we developed digital rehab technology, and we do this in swimming pools and peer-led virtual rehab. The thing is, apps don't heal people. People do. And this is what we missed in our first understanding of the problem. It's not the relationship between our users and the technology that creates motivation. It's the relationship with other people who use that technology, whether that's in person in leisure centres or virtually at home, that creates that motivation to be proactive in their MSK self-management. So it was the design methodologies, exploring how and why with users, stakeholders, that made us better understand the true problem and create better solutions.
And how has that changed things for you?
I guess what's really changed is we spend a lot more time working with people, whether it's patient representative charities, whether it's people living with the condition, particularly the core demographic we work with from 55 to 80, to ask them why they would take a more proactive role in their self-management. What would make them want to engage? They all know exercise is good for them. They all know that diet and health things make a huge impact, but it doesn't mean we do it. We're all terrible at this. We always have a piece of chocolate or a glass of wine more than we ever mean to. So it's going to understand what would motivate them. So that's what's changed hugely. We spend a lot more time now speaking with people, speaking with organizations and charities to really get down to the nub of the problem before we start creating designing solutions. And that's kind of, different to where we were 3 years ago.
And the impact on your business or the impact on the quality of your products and services? What would you say?
People love what we do. That's what's changed. People really enjoy engaging with the services and products that we deliver. We spend, and not just our end users, but also the organisations that we work with to facilitate and deliver them. Whether that's leisure centres, whether that's arthritis charities, we've really worked with every single stakeholder in that process to make sure it works for end users, but also those organisations delivering it. And it means that we are delivering something that people want to use rather than being told to use by a public health agenda.
Thank you. Thanks. Let's open it out to the other panelists now. But with your you have a sort of broader experience. So where have you seen design and innovation work well, and what characterises that? Should we start with you, Ben Watson?
Yeah, sure. Where I've seen it work well, this is really when design, first of all, is understood. There's a good understanding of design. It's recognised, and as part of that, an organisation knows where, when, and how to apply it. And I think applying design approaches, design thinking at the beginning, really, we hear people talk about this a lot, and that's because it's true. So it's worth picking up that guidance, that getting involved very early on, bringing in design capability into everything from how you decide why you should go after some sort of challenge, and where to start, what problem to start with, and the type of solution that you're looking to put together. So really design, especially at the front end, that's really when I think you can fully leverage design and maximize the impact of design on your innovation outcomes.
And Ben, Griffin, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases it comes down to getting the best design talent that you can. So recognizing your own strengths and gaps, and really working with the best design talent that you can find. I think, expertise is far more important than any process. And I think a characteristic, certainly that I've seen of the best design, is this ability to translate contextual insight and understanding into actionable ideas. And it's interesting when you look at any kind of design process, it's broken down into stages. But my experience has been that a lot of the real value of design happens at the points of sort of inflection between those stages. Mm-hmm. So I've seen, as Abby mentioned before, I've had the privilege of oversight of a lot of design-led or projects that include design activity. And in some cases, what I've seen is people following the process to a T, gathering all of this insight, doing all the things that they think they ought to be doing. And then they present you with their design. And it's not really clear how that has been informed by the research that they did. It just turned out that was kind of a tick box exercise. And I think that ability to move from the intangible to the tangible, it's a skill rather than a process. And it's a skill that experienced and trained designers have. So if you don't have that capability in-house, recognize that and get the help, find the right people to help you with it.
I think building on what Ben has just said there as well, getting it involved at the front end, once you start to really understand the need and the challenge that you're working on, you can revisit that. And when it comes to later down the line, being asked the same questions again around why are you focusing in this area? Why are you taking this approach? You can always go back to your why, but how you come to that why when you're applying design that approaches, it gives you a much more concrete foundation to start from that you can keep revisiting and then reapplying throughout. It guides your roadmap, it guides the structure of your teams and the approaches that you take. So I think this is a really important point that Ben's making there as well.
Mark, have you got anything to add on this?
Yeah, I'd like to just put in if you like, a tangible example. Really from a manufacturing and engineering perspective, that was where we came from, but how we use design and innovation to improve that. So a little while ago now, I was working with a packaging and machinery conveyor equipment company. and they needed to cut costs. It was their best-selling machine, but they were facing some stiff competition from the Far East, cheaper machines, and of course their margins were going down accordingly. Now, there was little design expertise within the business, and initially they wanted to go about a conventional cost-cutting process. But we worked with them really to look at value analysis, so redesigning parts and assemblies to reduce their costs, but also using the opportunity to improve their function, serviceability, aesthetics, and ergonomics. Thinking about sort of user-centered design, one of the first things was understand the users all the way through the product's life cycle. So whether that was customers or buyers, operatives, maintenance staff, service staff, those who assemble the equipment, really obtaining all those insights before embarking on the value analysis activity. The good thing that we found, it energized this very traditional engineering business. So we had people from all departments, all sectors, full of ideas, which fed into this, which we ranked, reviewed, and acted upon. And subsequently, there was a range of design activities that followed. Some were around CAD-driven design changes. Others were around improvements in processes, design of jigs, fixtures, fittings, for example, as well as improvements with suppliers down the supply chain. But ultimately, what we did was communicate these changes through the business, keep everyone energized, ran the program, and the ultimate impact was a reduction in costs of about 12%, which was a sizable amount for this very traditional engineering SME where margins were tiny. And that 12% then enabled them to either cut costs in the particular market or increase margins in other markets. But for me, one of the biggest tangible takeaways was this really robust value analysis process they developed, which they subsequently used on other machines to improve those designs for essentially across the family of machines, and of course, improving the profitability of the business at the same time. But crucially, getting everybody energized and involved in understanding the impact design can have, when ultimately this business had very little design expertise in the first instance.
Thank you. If I could chip in very quickly there as well, I think what's really interesting there is the value contribution of design was very visible. And so I think another kind of key to success, if you like, is building in those metrics and measurement processes from the start of the project, so that you can build evidence as you go along and you can demonstrate the value contribution of design.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what a diverse range of views, so many different points of views, drawing on so many different experiences, from personal ones to working in big companies or overseeing lots of design projects. I'm wondering if we could just remind the audience that they've got the opportunity to ask some questions too, so you can drop them into the chat. That would be great. We'd love to hear from you. We had so many questions we didn't manage to get through this morning. I'm hoping we can make up for some of that today. Let's put this panel under a bit of pressure. So we've talked a little bit about some of the benefits of design and how it's worked for you guys in particular. I'm thinking from like an innovation point of view, it's inherently risky and uncertain. Do you think how can design be used to manage that, and how does that pay off in practice? Ben, Griffin, can we come to you on that one?
Yeah, you can't take the risk out of innovation, but the first step towards mitigating any risk is to understand what the risks are. And I think a common failure in innovating businesses that aren't using these kinds of design methodologies and design approaches, if they're technology led, for example, all of those risks are around the technology. Is the technology going to work? Is the technology scalable? There are an awful lot of risks that are harder to recognize and to quantify, and they're emotional risks. What's the risk that someone is not going to like this? What's the risk that someone is going to be concerned about this? If you use these, a contribution that design can make is to open your eyes to these other types of risk and help you put processes and frameworks in place to mitigate those risks.
Thanks, Ben.
Can I add
What are you thinking? Sorry.
Could I add something to this then? So one of the things that I often see in businesses that they try to deploy a kind of a funnel. The idea that we start wide, we explore widely, and then we kill ideas, and we kill ideas based on resolving or not being able to resolve risk and uncertainty. But too often, I think people get stuck into tunnels. You know, what goes in comes out, and we overcommit to our first thoughts rather than really challenging and trying to get to grips with the risks associated with these ideas and the uncertainty thereof.
Yeah, Sam, what about from a small business perspective, startup growing? Have you got thoughts?
Yeah, from our perspective, actually, embarking on human-centered design means that we are mitigating against commercial risk with our innovations, because ensuring that our customers are fully embedded in the way the design process works from day one means that what we produce at the other end, hopefully, is going to have a better chance of meeting their needs and being more commercially viable and something that people are actually going to want to buy. So for us, it was always really important to have that dialogue, and we've continued that. And we are a small business, but that relationship with our customers and the user groups, building the community, that's been really vital to mitigate against the commercial risk that we might otherwise entail when we complete an innovation cycle or when we're designing new products.
Were you going to say something on that point, Ben Watson, or will we move on?
Oh, yes, I was going to add around the topic of risk, which I think is a really interesting one from a design point of view. Design, I believe and see, is a really fantastic framework for change, managing change, driving some sort of transformation. That's partly the whole point around design is changing from where you are today, where you want to be and how you get there. So I think that's inherent within design, within the design process. I think it's also important, though, to recognise that the risk changes, the risk profile and the appetite for risk within an organisation, regardless of the size of the organisation, can be very different. And whether it's front-end innovation, early-stage innovation, or whether it's new technology scouting or exploration, or further down the line into what people might refer to as new product introduction. And I think that becomes, the further you go, let's say, if we think of it as a spectrum, we're going to the right here, the more of a almost risk management process it becomes, but the front end can be really very challenging. And I think design is uniquely positioned to be able to handle high levels of uncertainty and for you to consciously make a decision as to whether or not, as an organization, regardless of whether you're a local school, a large organization, a corporate government body, is it your intention to shape and change the future that you're looking at, or to adapt yourself to be able to respond to a future, or actually to reserve the right to play in that future? And I think design gives you this framework, whether it's the front end, the middle, or closer towards commercialization. So I think it's absolutely well placed and something that really could be used much more than it is today.
Yeah, Ben Wilkins, can we come to you? Have you got comments on that, and maybe something around the role of design in building resilience as well?
Yeah, I have to go next. A quote that struck me from a very large lizard movie in the 90s was that you were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should. And I think kind of that's what we've gone through in design, and even projects we're working on now and creating better rehab in swimming pools. We've gone to figure out if we should build it rather than if we could build it. I know of so many tech organizations where the focus is getting the right technology skills in to build whatever it is they're creating, rather than taking the steps out, first of all, to understand that they should create it in the first place. There are millions of apps on the app store. So many of them have hardly ever been used. That was a complete waste of time, energy, and resources. So going out to understand that the should, and in effect, the great buzzword around if you're going to fail quickly. Well, what if you could fail before you even start failing? What if we could better use resources? That's a much lower risk way for organizations and startups and to make sure they put their time and energy in the right place as opposed to the wrong place. And I think that's, for us as a small organization, is why design and taking on these methodologies, process and skills into the organizations has been so critical. When it comes to resilience as well, it makes us more resilient. I think the reason being is that because we go around in lots of iterative cycles and we keep having to change and respond to our users, our technology capacity, and the world around us, it means that we keep shifting and adapting. And so as a result, I would argue as an organization, we are far more resilient now because 2.5, 3 years ago, we were dependent solely on leisure centers as our core customers. A big thing happened in the last couple of years that meant that leisure center customers are really difficult to work with. So we looked at how we should be better working with our key beneficiaries, and that's informed our new technology and our new products and services. So going through and designing better services has made us way more resilient as an organization going forward too.
Cool. Perhaps we could move on. There's I think we're getting questions around this, but it's something that we're concerned with too. Wondering about how we can identify and then overcome the barriers around design and innovation. How have you guys overcome that? What do you think the barriers are, and how should we overcome them?
I'm happy to have a go at this, Chris. I think I've come across quite a few barriers with the organisations I've worked for, both in KTP and previously. So off the top of my head, things like generally lack of knowledge and awareness of the step change improvements design can provide a business. Cynicism I've come across, so sometimes born from the false idea that design is superficial or not relevant to their company or not relevant to their sector. Alongside that, some people believe it to be a little bit highbrow. Again, false perception. Much of my career has been manufacturing, so nuts and bolts. So often you get the idea that it's not really for them, it's not really for their sector. It's more for companies who are in consumer products, aesthetics, graphics, that sort of thing. So these sorts of false ideas I've come across are quite common. In terms of overcoming them, education, as a former Prime Minister once said. For me, the first thing is to bring people into the design process, particularly from a usability perspective. So asking them how they use products all the way through the product's whole life cycle. So again, touching on my previous point, whether it's assembly or service, obviously users and customers, but how products are maintained and serviced. Bring people in at each one of those stages and use language that they're familiar with. Use language that resonates with them. Understand the feelings, the empathy, all those people throughout the design process. And also, a little further on, the importance of demonstrations and demonstrators that resonate with people, whether these are excellent prototypes or fantastic graphics or renderings or appropriate technical documentation, depending on who the audience is. But I think ultimately for me, you've got to point out the personal benefits or the organizational benefits for whoever your customer is. So ultimately, you've got a whole range of potential barriers. Some of them are false, some of them are due to perception, but understanding people's personal perspective and then addressing that directly with appropriate language and demos, etc., I think goes a long way.
Thanks for that, Mark. Yes, could we move on a little bit to look at the really practical stuff, and maybe what mechanisms people have used to engage with design? So Ben Griffin, we could maybe start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Innovate UK and I guess our vision for the future as well. I mentioned in my little spiel this morning, it's a really exciting time. Our latest plan for action has design built in as recognised as a strong foundation of innovation. That sets a really important, gives us a mandate, if you like, to integrate design support and encouragement across all of our programs in a way that we've started to do in the past, but there's definitely opportunity for us to do more. So, Innovate UK offer a full range of different types of support for innovating businesses. It's not only financial, but a range of interventions based around inspiring involving and investing. So there are grant funding opportunities, there are innovation loans, there are investment accelerators, all of which might be challenge based or open scope. And I would encourage everyone to just look at the Innovate UK website, sign up for newsletters and so on. And I think opportunities of that sort will be flagged through the Innovation Network as well. In all of those areas, Innovate UK is looking to support risky innovation activity, right? We recognize that risk is inherent in innovation, and that's why we exist, to help you do the stuff that might be a bit too risky for other types of investment, for example. That said, we're very interested in what you intend to do to manage that risk, and that's where design can come in. So if you come to us with a great idea and you can demonstrate that you're using design methodologies and design expertise to build confidence around that idea, and that that through those methodologies you understand the different risks that you need to deal with, and you've got frameworks in place to do that, then it strengthens your application, regardless of whether it's a design funding competition or just a broader innovation support mechanism. Design is a good thing to have in your application. Aside from the grant funding, we also offer business growth support through our Innovate UK Edge programme. That's delivered by a national network of innovation growth advisors. And for the last year, we've run as part of that a programme called Design for Growth, which offers design management coaching to companies. We'll have supported something like 160 companies through that scheme by the end of this year, and it's something we hope to continue running through 22 and beyond. And then, of course, we've got the KTN and the Design Innovation Network, which is going to be really important mechanism for us to deliver both the thought leadership aspects of our programme and also the practicalities of connecting businesses and the design community. So that's part of it. Mark, I'm sure, can talk a bit about KTP and Future Leadership Fellowships, which are also a really useful tool for bringing design expertise into your organisation. And we'll continue to offer bespoke, we'll build design support into our programmes from the outset. We will also continue to offer bespoke support mechanisms for companies seeking to undertake early stage design activity and to work with the best design expertise. So we've run, some of you might be familiar with the Design Foundations competitions that we've run in the past. We hope to reboot those and keep those going on a regular basis so that you'll always know when that next opportunity is going to be.
Thanks for that, Ben. I've really noticed in the conversations we've had the role that Innovate funding plays in helping people really embed design in what they're doing. I can see Sam nodding her head. Yeah, you've got a great story, as has Ben Wilkins. Will we come to you first, Sam, as you're nodding so vigorously?
Oh, sorry, it's just the Design Foundations Round 3 was our first ever funding that we had from Innovate UK. And as a micro business, we just kind of very newly got our stuff together, and we were looking at our approach to design, and the Design Foundations Round 3 was absolutely instrumental in what we were doing and how we formulated and embedded that empathetic approach to design. And I see that there's a question to the side about how perhaps if you don't have lived experience of the problem that you're solving, how you employ design principles into that. And actually the Design Foundations Round 3 was a real key to helping us unlock exactly that kind of problem, because it allows you to really kind of deep dive into the problem that you're trying to solve and to explore the way that your end users or people that you're trying to work with really see the world. So that's kind of why I wanted to jump in.
I just want to very quickly add to that as well, that one of the really important things that I want to get from the Design Innovation Network is this two-way conversation. So it's not just about us providing information to the network, but we want to learn from you as well. We want to learn what's important to you. Certainly my ambition with design support at Innovate UK is that, yes, there's an important role for grant funding, but we also need to provide the soft support that wraps around that so that businesses understand what that opportunity presents to them and gives them the capability to get the maximum impact from that. You know, it's fine to say, well, here's some money to do design work, but actually what we need to help you do first is plan a really effective design engagement for which that grant funding can be deployed.
Thanks, Ben. Griffin, can we come to you, Ben Wilkins, and hear a bit about Good Boost and how you've used grant funding?
So yeah, design has painted a picture for the steps in the journey for us, but it hasn't told us the destination, but aided us in getting to the best place rather than just getting to a destination. And on top of that, the way that we communicate in a tangible ways to our partners and stakeholders. We work with a lot of leisure trusts, we work with a lot of charities, and we work with them on the journey of design. And having a framework, having models to work with means that everyone understands how they're taking part, and that we're not just asking beneficiaries some questions. There is steps in the process to get the best output. And it means that all of the partners and charities we work with better understand how they can add value in creating a better product and service for their end members and beneficiaries. And we've been successful in a few R&D grant programs and projects now. And one of the challenges that's been raised that often you need to come into those applications with the solution you're applying for. However, I'm starting to see a lot more of the R&D programs encourage a design gateway and fully acknowledge that it's not just about building the solution, but spending more time, energy, and resources in further exploring the problem and the potential solution. And this has been noticeable in the value that we get in the scoring we have from panels when we apply to these programs too, that we do a huge amount of co-design, we do a huge amount of user engagement before we even apply to them, so we can present our preliminary findings in our application. And it definitely seems to work. We get really highly scored applications, but also having the partners come with us. We apply to this program with our partners such as Swim England, Verse Arthritis, Arthritis Action, other arthritis charities, because they understand as a framework we work to, that we are working to say we know the solution, but we want to work with them as the organizations working directly with patients with lived experience to get to the right endpoint for them and for us. And I think that's a huge part of the reason why we've been so successful.
Thanks, Ben. Mark Lynch, can you tell us a little bit about KTP and how people might use programs like KTP to embed design?
Certainly can. So I'm an advisor on the KTP program, Knowledge Transfer Partnerships program, an Innovate UK program, as Ben mentioned previously. So the whole purpose here really is that we help ambitious companies who perhaps want to develop a new product or a new service or improve their processes, but perhaps they don't know how to, they haven't got the internal expertise, the facilities, the know-how. So in short, they've got a capability gap. What we'll do is we'll partner them with a university who has got those things, who has got the expertise, the research background, the experience, the facilities perhaps. We bring the two together and we work with them as an advisor. We'll ultimately help them draft and scope an application, essentially the project. Most of our projects are successful, so we've got 70 to 80% approval rating for KTP projects, which is quite remarkable for most competitions and funds. After success, we appoint what we call an associate. So this is a bright young person, average age actually about 31. They are typically a graduate, a postgraduate, a PhD or a postdoc, depends on the complexity of the project. And they will work in the business full time and act as the conduit for the knowledge transfer or knowledge exchange from the university via the associate and deep embedded within the business such that it becomes business as usual by the end of the project. Most projects last around about 2 years, up to 3 years is the maximum. The advisor stays with you all the way through. So the advisor provides best practice, knowledge, connections, etc., to ensure the project stays on track. What we've found in the context of design is that we've partnered a full range of businesses in virtually every sector with some of the UK's most illustrious design schools and universities, as well as some of the less well-known gems. And advisors are located across the UK. So wherever your business is located, there'll be an advisor who understands the local ecosystem, the local universities, local design schools, etc., and should be able to bring those together and help. So ultimately, it's been a very successful program. It's been going for, this is its 47th year. You don't get that sort of traction without delivering results when you're publicly funded. And it's also on the radar of Innovate UK's new CEO. It's destined for additional funding, and we're actually expanding the team. So we've got a website. There's lots of case studies, lots of examples. And as I say, there's 32 advisors like me across the UK, happy and willing to help companies who are interested in design and other areas of knowledge transfer.
Cool. We've had a question about how do you justify spending more time and resources on correctly identifying needs and contexts up front? So that's like kind of the investment required either coming from investors or from grant bodies or potentially from senior stakeholders in your business. How do you get them to shell up front for doing more work earlier? Who would like to go for that?
Shall I do it? So Boost has just received some funding from the British Design Fund, so we're really, really happy about that. But that's external investment for us. But it is also working with a fund that closely aligns with what our principles and values are, and that's really, really important. So I think that when you are seeking funding and investment, it is important to actively seek relationships with funders that will support you with your business ethos and your commitments. So ours is a commitment to human-centered design processes. We do have what we call an innovation pipeline. We've always had a business model and our business plan that reflects that. And I think that working with an organisation like the British Design Fund is how we are going to use that funding effectively to do what we need to do to move our business forward for the benefit of the women that we work with. But actually having that alignment in our core principles and finding a funder that does align with what we're trying to do in the longer term really was key to making sure that we could do that. But so my tip really in sort of knowing that you're going to invest is to make sure that you're clear about your strategy for innovation, so that if you're seeking partnerships or you're seeking external funding, you can ensure that the risks are managed, mitigations are in place, but also the vision of what you're trying to do is really, really clear to whoever you're going to be working with.
Thanks for that, Sam. I'm wondering if we could come to Ben Watson on that same question about, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think when it comes to justifying, that question of justifying spending more time and resources, and how do you do that? It's a bit of a balancing act, I think, where you can actually sort of, it's not a one-stop or one-step event. It's something that continues to happen throughout the design process in terms of ensuring that you're keeping an eye on needs, on the context, because that context can change. You don't want to sort of come up with a requirement, disappear for 18 months, launch a product and realize the world has changed. So I think it's okay for it to be something that continues, but of course there's that question as, when are you going to get moving with this, and for how much longer do you explore the context? Also, I think it's important to recognize that the quality of your design outcome, of your innovation, is often path dependent, and design helps you determine what is the right path. It's a little bit like the difference between complexity and complicated. Complicated, that's difficult, but you're going to end up with a jigsaw puzzle of, I don't know, Tower Bridge or something. The complexity part is quite different. So I think if you are able to use design as a research framework as well, not just designing, the outcome, but as a research method, then you can have these increments and you can continue to explore the context and spend your time and resources on that through your, let's say, prototypes or minimum viable products is the term that's often used in agile methodology. So having something that allows you to continue to explore, I think this is important. And then I should add that you can also, let's say back to that word of justifying, you can also justify this time spent if you take more of a portfolio approach. I'm thinking now that sounds like big company talk, but I think it's relevant for all of us, because what I'm referring to with a portfolio approach is saying, okay, well, I have a near-term plan, and I have a plan that's further out, and how do they link together, and how do you spend your time and allocate your resources and allocate your time based on each of these? And it effectively becomes a permission giver to say, look, step away, this is our exploration space. I've seen that firsthand, with certain programs that have been looked at through a, let's say, more of a commercialization lens, and saying, goodness me, you're changing things, or the requirements are changing. That's okay, because we're in this early phase. So I think structuring where you are, being able to communicate that to the stakeholders when you're trying to justify what you're doing, that gives them a sense that you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you're doing it for the right reasons.
Thanks, Ben. I can see we've got so many questions coming through in chat. I think we've got through a few of them, and there's perhaps room for a couple more. Yeah, just picking up on one, somebody's mentioned, doesn't thinking tend to undervalue the hard bits like engineering, real world work and affordable solutions at scale? And I think when we're talking about design, we're not just talking about thinking. We've got a really expansive view of what design is beyond just design thinking, to encompass things like complexity science and other aspects that are difficult. We acknowledge it's difficult, and I think understanding and managing that complexity is key. Somebody's asked about contacting specific members of the panel, so I think you'd be able to do that in LinkedIn, or you can get in touch with us through the network directly. Yeah. Well, we have one more question for the audience, and then I've got a final question to wrap up. So yeah, what do the panel see as issues for micros and SMEs in attracting funding? I think specifically for design, what were the challenges that you guys faced around that? Sam Jackman and Ben Wilkins, did you face challenges, or was it quite a smooth process? It sounds like you.
Yes. So until very recently, I was still in another job, full-time job. And it was only when I managed to secure the investment from the British Design Fund, and I won some support from a Women in Business Prize, and different things came together, but only just before Christmas really was the first leap, although Boost has been running since 2018, so things take a long time. We've only just started to employ people, and obviously that includes myself. I've only just really recently become employed by my own company, but we've been running quite a long time. So as a micro business, there are significant challenges, especially when it comes to funneling resource, funneling time, funneling effort into things. But I think that if you're committed to that approach, you'll find a way to do it as a micro business. And I want to say to other micro businesses that might be on this call, that don't be put off that things like Innovate UK isn't for you, because it is for you. That's exactly what it's there for, to de-risk, to support financially, to give you the skill set that you need, to give you the extra capacity. Innovate UK funding for us over the past couple of years has given us the extra capacity we needed as a micro business to punch above our weight and to build our intellectual property, to build our innovation strategies. And that has actively led to us being in a really good place to secure that equity investment that we've just secured from the British Design Fund. So don't let it put you off that you're a micro business if you're going to embark on design innovation and really go for it. That's my final take-home message. I don't think I should say very much more. I'll pass to Ben.
That was brilliant, Sam. I think one of the biggest challenges we had is that as a small organization, you need to get products and services out there to start generating income as soon as you humanly can. And that means that you often look at taking the shortest route to get there, because ultimately cash flow and having cash in the bank account is king. And if you don't have it, well, that's the end of the organization. So many startups fail, and there was a real pressure to make sure you get that income in so you can cover your salary, the products and service delivery, and every other cost that comes under team and everything else. I guess the biggest challenge we've had is really embedding design and our approach to problem understanding as part of everything we do, because it's so easy to go, well, actually, we're a team of experts. We've got about 30 research publications. We understand what we're doing really well. We should know how we should get there. It's so easy to go that, well, we're the experts in the room. Obviously, we know what it should look like. And we were completely wrong. And we were wrong many times. And it's only through experience now that we've understood that and how wrong we were. So I guess our biggest challenge has been, how do you make sure that even though we're a small team, we're 9-10 people, how does everyone see this approach as part of their role? And that we need to have the structures and systems in our organization that we go through to say, are we doing the right thing? Do we have proper kickoff meetings? And actually going through things like Innovate UK, going through these programs where we have to have quarterly meetings, review meetings. We've now implementing that into what we do as an organization just internally, because that's improved how we approach it as well, where we actually critically reflect and ask each other, why are we doing this? How are we getting there? As opposed to going, we know how to build this, we think it's the right solution, let's go make it happen because we need to generate income yesterday. So I think that's been our biggest barrier, is how do you culturally have this adopted by people who do not have a design background across a small organization. Yes, as a leader in a micro-organization, as a leader in a small business, it's really important that you kind of hammer it home, and having frameworks to communicate and articulate that is really important for other team members to take it on in their everyday working.
Thanks. Sorry, Sam. Go for
Sorry,
it.
just to grow on Ben's points that he made, which were brilliant, but also to emphasize that as a micro business or a small business who's dedicated to human-centered design, it doesn't mean that that has to be massively costly, and that you can be innovative and you can be design-led without doing you can do it within the confines of what you have available. So I remember that there was a time when we were talking about the size profiles of some of the breast forms, and we actually modeled it in salt dough, Play-Doh stuff that we had, because that was a good way of understanding how bits and pieces would work together. Ben Griffin might remember us showing him lots of different things made out of paper mache that we used with a load of women at the Eden Project, where we did a human-centered design workshop with women, and we looked at 3D printing and doing different ways of modelling, and actually paper mache was much more intuitive for those women to work with, and it was also a really good way to explore the things that we wanted to do, and it wasn't expensive to do it. And those types of things really helped us actually just prove to ourselves that we could really dedicate ourselves to this kind of methodology through our product design without actually breaking the bank every time we needed to do something, by employing lots of 3D modelers, or doing lots of 3D design work, or doing lots of 3D printing. We could go through stages before we got to that kind of point. So I just thought that was worth sharing. It might be a barrier. If you feel like a barrier is cost or how you approach things, then there are ways that you can do it that equally is valid.
Thanks, Sam. That's really valuable. And yeah, thank you for your takeaway as well. I wonder if we could come to the rest of the panel just super quickly, really succinct answers on what would your takeaway be for the audience? How can they look to use more design and innovation and use it wisely? Will we start with Ben Griffin? 30 seconds. What would you recommend?
Join the Design Innovation Network. Help us help you and help each other.
Yep. Yeah, Ben Watson, have you got thoughts?
Great question. So start early and recognise, I made the comment at the beginning of the discussion that the importance of the understanding design, and my reason for making that comment is that design can look quite different at different stages of whatever it is you're doing at the beginning and so on. And that's one of the reasons why it can sometimes be left out, because it can be looked at and perceived as, oh, that's marketing, or hang on, that's social psychology, hang on, that's thermofluid dynamics. It's all part of the same thing. And that's one of the frustrations as well with design, is people go, oh, goodness me, design is everything. You know, these guys, design thinking is claiming, you know, it's everywhere. Well, it is. and it's really important, I think, to really recognize that getting it involved early on, it's a thread that will run through everything that you're doing, any transformation that you are trying to move towards. So that would be my encouragement, to start early. If you're a smaller organization, you can also use partnerships, which I have found, certainly from my 5-person startup experiences previously, that working with partners, if you are a smaller organization, is key.
Thanks, Ben. Mark Lynch, then Ben Wilkins, super quickly. And then Chris, if you've got a final thought as well, it'd be good to hear from you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, schoolboy error. If you don't know much about designing and you're unfamiliar, don't be put off. Suspend any preconceptions you have and get involved. Reach out to people, connect. This network's an ideal place. Work and collaborate with those who do. Understand how it's relevant to your business or your organization, and be involved in the process all the way through. Don't just leave it to somebody else. Be involved. It's an iterative process, and learn as much as you can.
Cheers, Mark. Ben, you're up.
As a small organization, just telling your team workers and co-workers that design is important isn't enough. You have to create structures and environments so they embed design in what they're doing. And it's everyone's responsibility, not just one person's in the organization. That's one. 2, co-design is really tough. Co-design is not just asking a group of people and then getting the average of all their responses. Co-design is, particularly within patient systems and patient interventions at the moment, it's become a real buzzword, and it's becoming a tick box exercise. It's not just a tick box exercise. Actually, it is tough to get it right, but you get it right and actually it will pay itself in dividends.
Thanks, Ben. Chris, 30 seconds.
Then, yeah, my 30 seconds is, consider what you're doing is you're designing experiments. So you need to design those experiments really, really well. And what you're trying to do is to use design to take out risk, build evidence as quickly and as cheaply as possible, which is kind of building on Sam's point. It's a learning exercise, learn fast.
Thanks so much. Cheers. So we've got a final a slide to show you that just covers super quickly what we're going to do as a network, some of the stuff that we're going to deliver. We've got a wide array of things that we're going to cover. So things from looking at systemic challenges in the wider world, but also how design and innovation work. This will be partly associated with our advisory board activity, but also working with other programs and funding. We're going to be looking at insights, tools, guidance, thought leadership from our communities. Watch out for that stuff. Sign up to the network for more on that. And as well as systemic change at that sort of wide systems level, we'll be working with individual companies and projects to help them think about how best they can use design. We've got a drop-in set up. So there's details of that on our website if you want to sign up for a 20-minute discussion with somebody around how you can use design and you want to be connected to the right people. That's what we're here for fundamentally. And building on that, we're going to launch a collaborative platform in the next few months that will give you visibility of the other partners in the network and freedom to communicate, connect, and we'll generate some opportunity for member-led activity. So yeah, thank you so much for being a great audience, for some of the great questions that came in. There were some that were very specific around funding opportunities, but again, you do get in touch if you want more detail on those things. So thank you to the audience, thank you to KTN support, to Leanne, Matt and Anita in particular, and to our wonderful panel for their time and insights and sharing their experiences so openly today. So thank you, Samantha Jackman, Ben Wilkins, Ben Watson, Ben Griffin and Mark Lynch.
Thank you.